Hey all, thanks for being here. We are going to do the Reverie Roundtable in just a second. You all having a fantastic day out there. Yeah. Okay. Oh, let's get this started. It's gonna be a little bit different than what we usually. But hoping. Hoping for a good one. Okay, well, we're waiting on people to show up, so I might as well just wait for that. So, any case, while we're waiting for individuals to show up, let's take a look. We're gonna look at some articles while we're waiting. The death toll in Morocco, it's past 2,600. I'm not sure if anyone's been following that, but massive tragedy there in Morocco. 2,600 at least, you know. Yeah, at least 2,600 people have died, and it's really sad. Um, yeah, really awful, actually. Um, like buildings collapsed, and a lot of the damage seems to be happening in rural areas, and they can't get help over there. So might be people trapped in the rubble who like could be safe but aren't going to be safe because of lack of help. It's really truly awful. So shout out to the rescuers out there who are helping out. Yeah, it's massive devastation, like a like 8.6 or something earthquake on the Richter scale there. So it was really bad. Um, and I'm not sure if there's any relief funds, but if you have the ability to help out, please help out the people in Morocco. We should be having an international effort when we're talking about these national look. And something that just kind of annoys me is that people don't really care about like things that don't happen in their country, right? It's like, oh, it's just kind of sad, but like it's I don't know. I feel like if we had more empathy all around, we'd be a better world. But like, we could have a better a better way of tackling these issues. Um, in the end, I hope our government sends significant aid to help these people. I know sometimes they make promises and they don't keep them, like they did with Haiti. Haiti had that earthquake, 12 years ago or something. And like afterwards, there was a lot of big promises by nations. Oh, we're definitely gonna help out and make sure everything's good. That help never came, and now Haiti's in a devastated place. Uh, that earthquake was really, absolutely destructive to that society, and because of that, they um like they're in the situation where they are now, where civil society's pretty much falling apart. Anyway, I don't want the same thing to happen in Morocco. Though I think Morocco was just an overall stronger state, but something to keep in mind. All right, well, the people have arrived, so I can jump in there. Hey fellas,
Hey, what's up?
what's up? Thanks for being here. Oh, Wick, thank you for the kind raid. Hope you guys all did well. Um, or enjoyed your time there. Let me shout Wick out. Um, Wick. Yeah, shout out to Wick. Hope you're having a real a good one over there. Everyone check out Wick's channel if you haven't done so already. He's a great guy. All right, let's see if we can get this up and running. Hmm. All right, go. So there's my face and Factoid's face. Hooray! How are you, friend?
How you doing, brother? Happy Monday. Happy Monday.
Happy happy Monday to you, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I never like Mondays. Like, are you a big fan of Mondays?
No, I mean, well, besides your show, which is the highlight of my Monday, but Monday mornings, not a good time.
Yeah. Do you are your weekends tend to be really enjoyable or?
Well, this last weekend I was working pretty late. I actually worked during the weekend. So if I work during the weekend, it sucks. If I'm not working during the weekend, it's usually okay.
Okay.
I'm busy almost every weekend. Like I always pack my weekends full of all sorts of shit.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I'm usually not busy. And I like it that way. I remember I worked at this one firm where I had to work over the week. We have to be available, you know. And being on call. Oh my God, that's awful. Have you ever done that, Lactoid? Been on call?
Um,
I don't think that's a problem for lawyers, right?
well, yeah, I mean it's salary, so you basically you're always kind of on call. But like during an hourly job, I don't know if I've ever actually been on call. To be honest with you.
I was salaried. I was on call. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
Salary and on call. Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. It only happened to me once, and uh, I don't know if I would ever do that again. Like, to be able to have the people drop everything and just walk off, no thanks. Any which way. Hello all. This is a very itty bitty Reverie roundtable, but we're gonna make it work. We're gonna try something a bit different than we usually do. But I'll introduce my guest. This is Lactoid. How are you, friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much, Prime, for having me. Tiberius, I am looking forward to chatting with you. This is going to be definitely very interesting. So, yeah, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
And I apologize for not putting you in your proper place. There, Lactoid. And our friend Tiberius is with us. How are you, Ty?
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing all right. I'm a little spurned by your decision to turn down my last invite to you. Because
I didn't
I
turn
like
it down. I was not. I didn't even see it. Remember? That's why I accepted Jack.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
I was like, I was
forgot.
just getting to it.
Okay, fair enough. I have literally I made that panel and like you were the guy that I wanted to see. So it was just one of those deals where I'm like, still salty about it, but I totally get it, man.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I've been like completely out of it for a while now. It's a problem. I got to get my head back in the game. But yeah, but
It's
I hope.
summer.
Yeah. I hope you did enjoy your panel. Hope it turned out well, despite
It turned
that.
out really well.
All right, cool. Yeah. So anyway, so what I was planning on doing here, my friend Lactoid and I have a long list of like
Complaints and
differences.
grievances.
Yeah, grievances against each other. Certainly. But like we're always like arguing back and forth and great debates. But like the problem is usually it's in the context of a panel, and it makes it difficult to get deeper into these discussions. So like for this time, I figured why don't we like jump into that? And we have our friend Ty here, and I don't know where he falls on any of our differences. So I'd really want to
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Sometimes I definitely take a far more like staunch side than others, but there's definitely a level where one, I will be happy to moderate your love of squirrel. So thank you for having me here. But also, like, I actually like both of you on at least the topics that you guys have thrown out. Because while I don't even, I know I don't agree with both of you on those, or at least some of them. So there's levels where I can split the field, but it's also we can get into kind of the nuance and the weeds because there's only a handful of us here to like actually work some of that out. So I'm actually really excited for this one.
All right, awesome. I'm really glad you guys are game. So Lactoid, if there's anything particular that you want to discuss, like either now or in the future, like just feel free to throw it out there. I figure that we could start because we didn't really get a dig too deep into this last time because again we were in the context of a panel, but I had talked to you about packing the courts, and I caught you off guard there because you weren't the solution that I presented wasn't something you had heard before, and now that we have some time, I'd like to like get like a deeper response. So I'll lay out what I said, and you can respond from there. I talked about how um, uh, for packing the courts, I would like to like supersize the courts. Usually, when you hear about packing courts, it's like adding 4 of like your type, you know, D or R onto the courts to correct some perceived imbalance. What I was talking about was massively expanding the Supreme Court. So it like we'll just use a number 50, like 50 justices on there, and so they would have like a rotating panel where or like maybe a randomized panel where for each case they would like draw lots, and I think this is how they works in like the federal judiciary, where they're like you just get like a judge randomly, and you just like have a random assortment of judges, and then they would decide on a case. The reason why I think this would be a good idea is because this would massively reduce the importance of each individual judge, right? Like, well, we hang on the words of a person like Clarence Thomas or John Roberts, right? On each of them, and it gives them massive undue power. So I'd like to reduce that and like dilute it while still leaving like the courts in place, right? There are a lot of progressive leftists who talk about like, well, maybe we should get rid of the courts and all that. I'm not so sure about that. It was a good idea, but leaving the courts in place as is currently constituted, simply bigger. So what do you think?
Would okay, I guess 2 housekeeping issues. When it comes to whether or not the court decides to hear the case because they get to decide cert, is that something that only the drawn judges vote to hear, or is this something that all 50 of them would all vote? Okay, we should hear this case, and then once like that vote's gone through, then they select the random 9.
And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is currently just one judge like decides that on the Supreme Court. They don't all like vote on it. That was my thought, but am I wrong on this?
I could be fucking wrong. I'm pretty sure it's a majority. Let me check.
It feels like that would be just like a preliminary judgment on the case, basically. So my understanding,
it's a majority, or well, no, it's not a majority. It's 4, so it's not 1.
Okay. So
right. So I mean, what number would you pick? I guess.
Okay, so I didn't know that was the case. I was assuming it was a 1 before, but we can. Whether to hear a case. I'm trying to like think of a number that would be significant. So the way it's currently is less than half. We could say 24, but and so this is sent to all the judges. Is you understand? Like all the judges look at the case, and then when at least 4 vote for it. Okay, well then, if that's the case, then I mean, I guess I'd have to put more thought in that because I really thought it was.
And
just
they
one
reject the
judge.
vast majority, the vast majority of them.
Yeah. I'd have to put more thought in that, but like for now, I'd say 24.
Okay. So you'd have, and then. So you'd have 50 Supreme Court justices that are sort of on standby, and then you could maybe even accept more hearings, honestly, if you have that many judges, because you just have more manpower to actually hear and do the work and write the opinions. Are you concerned at all with the situation of what if you have like the Supreme Court, you have like one randomly drawn 9, write a Supreme Court opinion that disagrees with another randomly drawn 9 Supreme Court opinion, and they happen to drop, let's say, like 2 or 3 days apart, where like they've already heard the case, they've already wrote the opinion, and one totally contradicts the one that comes after it. Because normally the Supreme Court would like when this happens among federal judges, the Supreme Court weighs in and says, well, no, actually this one got it right and this one got it wrong. But the Supreme Court is the top court, so are we going to have like another court on top?
Yeah, yes.
Like, settle the disagreement. Yeah, the hyper court that settles the disagreements between the different aspects of the Supreme Court.
So,
go ahead. Oh yeah, I just kind of wondering if you would actually have, in the kind of the same way we have it with senators, like a senior like court justices to where it's like, hey, you've been here 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. You're kind of like the creme, the creme de la creme, so you get the big cases, or you get the full 9 panel or the full 5 panel or however big that is. Like, there's actually a number of ways I could see this working out. Like, just the regularized packing the court idea, I think is terrible. I think it's a short term like gain politically for a long term disaster for everybody. But like actually expanding the court with an intended purpose of like, hey guys, we're a nation of 330 million people. We have so many damn cases that get sent through the federal system that, you know what, the Supreme Court doesn't hear half the shit they should. All right, yeah. Like if we want to if you want to like expand the court and then like give it like subcommittees to where it's like, hey, these 5 are the people that are on like the Supreme Court committees for like law and order, criminal justice, that kind of shit. Like, yeah, I'm game.
So I'll try to tackle both of these. And I'll try to circle back to the first question like to asked me. Like now I'm thinking it actually might be better to have like a case counsel. So you would have like every year, like you would put like 5 or I don't know 7, 9 justices on the case council, and that would decide which cases the courts take, right? But again, we would go through different ones each year. And then they could also see if the courts are taking cases that are duplicates. So if they are covering grounds that like if it's reasonable to expect that the outcomes of these cases will have similar grounds, then they either don't accept it or they we'll push this off until later. That so we don't have 2 at the same time. I'm fine. I don't think the issue of the courts like handling 2 of like the same cases will like be a thing that comes up a whole lot. I don't think that's like a huge worry. But even if that's the case, we can say that all right, well we can like fairly anticipate that this case is going to cover these grounds, and so this will be the case that we take, and we'll go from there. And then afterwards, if that isn't the case, right? So if the ruling doesn't cover the expected grounds, if then maybe they can visit it and say that we'll take that second case.
So the effect of this, and I understand like the goal that you're pushing for, and you would diversify the power, but the effect of this will be more instability. When you mentioned how you're going to have don't have a situation where you have multiple cases handling the same thing being decided all within the same term. That's impossible to predict, right? Because when judges write opinions, and in this case when justices write opinions, they're making references to all sorts of interpretations, and they're making interpretations, right? They are interpreting the Constitution. And so let's say you have 2 cases that are completely different, but both of them have some kind of like hand in the 14th Amendment, right? Let's say they're both touching on the 14th Amendment.
Okay.
And then you have like one set of judges that rules that the 14th Amendment should be interpreted this way for this specific set of facts. And then you have a whole different set of facts. And in order to answer that question, you have a different court answer it entirely different way and say that the 14th Amendment actually applies this way. And while I guess both of the questions are answered, the answers are contradictory, right? Because now you have two courts that are saying that the 14th Amendment is supposed to be applied in a specific way. What happens if those ways contradict in any meaningful way, right? Who is the one that normally like decides disagreements between the 2 ways we see this? And that traditionally is the role of the Supreme Court. And I think this is kind of why you guys were sort of appealing to, well, we should have like either a hyper court with somewhat meaningly.
I don't actually want a hyper court.
Well, I know, but what Tiberius said, well, what if there's like senior members, right? We take
I didn't want that
senior
either.
members. Right, because when you do that, what essentially you're doing is just creating a new Supreme Court, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're looking for any kind of body that exists to resolve disagreements between courts, that is the Supreme Court, right? So what it almost sounds like you guys want is you just want like another appellate court, right? So you have like the trial court and then an appellate court and then like an even stricter appellate court and then the Supreme Court, maybe along those lines.
So I don't want that. I want a Supreme Court. So I think your concerns are quite interesting there. But one, like, and in terms of like the senior members thing, right? Like, yeah, I'm not for that. I don't know what the role of the Supreme Court justice is like per case. Maybe you could help me with that. Like, not Supreme Court justice, the Chief Justice. Excuse me. Like what do they do like specifically that is necessary? Because that might change my answer. That like it feels like they have more or less equal power, but
Yeah, more or less equal power. I mean, they get to preside over like certain administrative things around the court. It's not, we don't spend a super long time into it because I mean the Chief Justice, it's sort of like, you know, they're the person that is like kind of the administrative head. Communications goes through them, through the court. They have an equal vote to the other justices. So when it comes to deciding something, I mean, Roberts, you know, he can be outvoted, right? He
yeah.
doesn't like, he can't pull like a twofer or some shit. Um, the more I think about this, actually, like, the more I'm in favor of keeping a smaller, like, Supreme Court that in which you have a level of consistency where they're only hearing one case at a time. Because I can imagine, like, already, like, what if you have a scenario where, like, um, I don't know, you have one case here, one court hear a case about like the right, especially when it comes to like the right of privacy, right? Which then kind of like there's already been some turbulence about that. What if you have the court hear a case about birth control, right? And they establish that you have the right of privacy over progesterone. And then like a week later, you have a court who hears a case about maybe like some alternative form of facts or like some alternative form of birth control or something that could lead to perhaps like abortion or something along those lines, right? Or something where it's tangentially related. And then you have them rule, they specifically, let's say Griswold, or like the court that's deciding the birth control situation, specifically rules like the 14th Amendment means this. And then a week later, the same court technically says the 14th Amendment means this. Like, who do I like? If I am now like a lawyer, I'm making an argument for my client. Which one do I cite? Just cite whichever Supreme Court decision, like at the time, even if it's at the same time that supports my argument. I mean, because that's what I'd be doing anyway. So would I just be doing that?
Yeah. So like the more I think about it, the more like I don't. And it could be just like my view of the situation is dim, so I will, acknowledge that. But the more I think about it, the more like I don't care about this problem you're bringing up. Like we have a Supreme Court like that contradicts itself all the time, right? Like it does that,
which
constantly.
Isn't good.
No, yeah, and like it contradicts the past court, like it updates itself from a past court, and the lawyers cite decisions like you just said, whichever decision works best for them. So to cite an old decision, even though it's been like overruled, but like it gives their logic, their legal logic weight, right? Because a court somewhere, right, whether it be on the appellate level or like wherever, like has agreed with me, right? This is the logic that someone somewhere, a judge, used, and so they'll go with that. So like that, so it doesn't necessarily concern me that this might be the case. I don't think it would even come up as often as like you kind of making sound like. I think that we can actually have a bit of a balance between these cases to space it out to try to mitigate this issue. But like the fact that one justice might say one thing like is like legal arguments, right? Like aren't shut down by the Supreme Court. So like it's not as if when the Supreme Court rules on something that like you can't bring a case that is going to re-bring up the issue, like put it back in front of the court. It's not like the lawyers won't argue on any grounds that is advantageous to them. Like all these things still are the case. So like I'm not like particularly concerned. There's few times these things like directly interface with the public, right? I think the one thing that I would say that might be problematic would be in terms of the police, because that's the public facing uh, uh, mechanism of the justice system, right? And so, like, what are the powers of the police, and what is the post power? That I think might be problematic. But then the police tend to do whatever the fuck they want any which way, right? At this point, the courts have never actually been able to rein in the police. So again, I don't seem to care. Like,
well, like, what if you like maybe here's a better example. You have one situation where the police have set up a heat scanner to scan the inside of somebody's house. And then you have another situation where the police set up like a smell scanner to smell the inside of somebody's house. And one court rules that the heat scanner is like okay or not okay. And then another like the same court, just different justices, like within like several days of each other, decides the smelling sensor is okay.
well,
Like
again,
now like it just seems like
the court,
yes, they're well, there's a level of instability that's always built in when it comes to, and the court does change its mind, and there is inconsistencies. But what I'm saying is that, like, what it seems like your policy will do, and maybe there's positives we can talk about, but one of the negatives is that it will have is that those discrepancies and inconsistencies are going to be magnified to some extent, right? You're going to have situations where, like, because in the current system, the Supreme Court tries to stick by what they've said in the past, right? There's even like case law on this where like there's factors that they implement that they have to meet in order to even overturn themselves.
what is the past to you? I'm just like point of clarification. When you say like stick to what they said in the past, you mean within this configuration of the court? Like last year we said something, so we'll stick with that, or do you mean past courts?
Generally, right? So the idea is that the court tries to not overrule itself. It obviously will if it decides that there's factors, and I can bring up the 5 factors, but there's like specific factors that they have decided that they don't necessarily needed to be met because the Supreme Court has the ability to overturn the Supreme Court. But they really try to hold themselves to the idea of you have to hit these 5 factors in order to overturn past law because consistency in the rule of law and jurisprudence are like some of the very basic tenets of the American system, right? The predictability of I know what the law is, because part of the idea of consenting to the law is not having it change on you every 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And so, in order to actually change it, there needs to be some level of process here. And so, the Supreme Court, they have to, if they're going to overturn something they did last year, they have to at least bring up what they said last year and specifically explain why they're not applying it here or why they're overturning it and why they should overturn it, right? In this system, it's going to be impossible because you have decisions coming out by different justices in the same term. So, I mean, they're not going to have the time to address each other.
Once again, I think the case counsel actually deals with this. In the example you gave, the smell test and the the smell scanner and the heat scanner, like that would easily fall within a duplicate case situation. And so you would take one of those and run with that. I want the police to start smell scanning my place. Then Mexican food all day, every day for me. And so, but yeah, so like I think that's like a simple example of like how we could we don't have to worry about duplicates. That like that a because I hear this from court watchers all the time. There's like the Supreme Court like blogs and whatever, right? They talk about how this case is big, right? This case hasn't been decided yet, but the case has been taken up by the Supreme Court, and this is huge because of these implications, right? That like as a legal scholar or a watcher of the court, you can see that this case touches on these particular grounds, right? That and it could have these implications depending on how it's decided. That case counsel could do exactly that and say that, well, these two cases are quite similar. Why don't we hold that off until either the next term or maybe like 2 terms. Maybe there's like a delay before it's brought up again. So I think I don't know. I think it's super simple. You brought up something else in terms of like stability. I I don't see this as causing a major instabilities. Like I think. Well, sorry, jurisprudence is what I want to talk about. Yeah, like you could have it so that like the court respects past decisions. You can do the same thing, right? Like the court is a conservative, lowercase c, a conservative institution, and the judges can still operate on those grounds, and say that, well, hey, this has been decided this way, and so that's going to affect how I look at this, right? Like the court has recently decided, or maybe not recently, decades ago decided this, and I can still apply that. None of that has to change.
Right, but opinions take a very long time to write, right? So what happens is like they put a lot of work into writing these very, very long opinions. They go into a lot of different aspects of law, and then like they finalize them and then they publish them. So
But like
like
even sorry, just very quickly, but like even within the context of one case decided by 9 judges, right? They'll each interpret the law differently. Even now, that's the case, right? So like those 9 judges, if they're talking about the 14th Amendment, will have their different interpretations, like right there, and then and no matter what the interpretation is, if it benefits some lawyer somewhere, they're going to cite that, even if it's in the minority.
well, right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What I'm saying, well, I mean, if you're going to be citing dissents, you're going to lose. But the whole point of this is that if you have 5 justices that all have a particular interpretation of an issue that's come forward, then like it's the same people reviewing like you're the same people reviewing the cases. And so it's going to be like more like the decisions that come out of those are more likely to be consistent, like following a thought process that is espoused by these 9 justices, as opposed to having different people, right? If you have different people putting along different, which I'm pretty sure is the point, right? What it sounds like is that the reason why you want these 50 justices is because you don't like the fact that you have 9 people that kind of like have their interpretation of the law that are making these decisions so consistently. It sounds like you actually want a little bit less consistency in the idea of you want different legal thought processes being expressed more commonly than as what it is now, right?
I guess essentially, I'm not sure if I would put it that way. My point is simply to dilute the power. Like, if it were the case that um uh just by a matter of chance, right? Like 9 like libertarian minded court judges were pulled like over the course of a term, right? Just like 50% of the cases, just like libertarian minded people were pulled. I'd accept that, right? That it would have a more consistent view of the law, that I would disagree, but I would accept that. It's that like I'm trying to reduce the power of each individual rather than necessarily like hope that like a progressive minded mix gets pulled, and then I might have a chance where I wouldn't have one under our current configuration.
What's your goal? What's like your goal? Well, you can talk about like diluting.
I do want to give
power.
Ty space. So yeah, Ty, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so when it came to Lactoid's criticisms, I'll definitely go with you guys that the seniority one, like, I was more spitballing there, and, like, that's probably not going to be worth a shit. What really does come down to me between where you guys are at is, like, the unitariness of the Supreme Court, to where it's just a handful of people, and they see a handful of cases, and they literally swing a big-ass hammer at people if they want to. I do think that's a little on the concerning side. Like, is it too much power invested within too few people? Versus if you expand it, there is a point where it's either you're going to have 15 people talking about a case, which probably makes everything go even slower than what it already does, or you're going to have, I think the only way you can actually make this work is subcommittees, to where it's not you have like a various appellate courts, but it's if you are on the Supreme Court, you're not allowed to hit any and all cases. It's that you're on a committee or a group that hits minority rights or law and order or something civic. The lines would have to be drawn out, but I think that's the only way you can actually functionally make this work.
I don't,
So yeah, it's either break up the Supreme Court into like subgroups, or we're probably stuck where we are.
yeah, I don't want that. What you just said. I don't like any part of that. I don't think you would have to do that. And like, I think just like Lacted was talking about, that each case touches on like a wide range of, like references to past cases. That like I don't know how you cleanly divide things as to like, well, this is a minority case, right? Like this affects like racial minorities, so this group will be able to and then we have literally the same problem. Then like we'd have a configuration of people on the racial minority court, and we'd have to be hanging on each and every word. Like we just like multiplied the problem uh uh of like of courts having a lot of power, or justices having a lot of power, just in like smaller domains. So yeah, I'm not in favor of that at all, and I don't think it's necessary. um I think there was another response I had to you, but I'll have to think about it. Lactoid, if you want to ask me another,
I
or
accept
if you want
defeat.
to tie, if you want to respond to me, Ty.
No, I largely accept defeat here. Like the problem here is like I'm more spitballing because one, I'm a little out of my depth on the Supreme Court. Like just the general like packing the court with just more people who agree with us. Like obviously we've been down that road before. It can get really shitty really quickly. Beyond that is we're talking about like structurally reforming the court to some degree, or we're just going to add more people. Um, Honestly, I kind of wonder if going back to 7 actually wouldn't help expedite some of this shit. But I think the best person to answer that would be Lactoid.
And also, like in terms of like the amount of people, I was gonna say this, the amount of people who hear the case, if you just spell it be 9, just to say hear a case, it just be like a random assortment of 9. Yeah, Lactoid, go ahead.
I guess I want to clarifying. We all agree here that packing the court, as it's normally referred to, is a bad idea. Do we agree with that?
Yeah, I think more or less.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, like I think. Well, it's okay. I don't want to say that it's necessarily a bad idea, because like I'm for diluting the power of each individual justice. And if that's the only way, then I guess. But I think that it's ineffective, and that like you're just going to replicate the same problem eventually.
Well, it also destroys the idea of the court, right? Because here's what's going to happen. You're just going to add the justices to each administration is going to go back like a ping pong ball, go back and forth and just throw on more whenever they want to get something done, right? The
I
fact
don't
that it's
think
not
it's
constitutionally limited is like crazy to me. That was an oversight, I think, by the framers of the Constitution for sure. I mean, that was like they literally were like the Congress. They figured out like how to the caps and how to like arrange for how many people are going to be on there. Imagine if we had something like that, where like there was no caps on senators and there was no real rules as to like who could be appointed senator. I mean, it'd be anarchy. Or even
I
president, right? Are you in favor of breaking up the position of president into a bunch of different roles?
no, certainly not. But I disagree with what you just said, though, in terms of it would necessarily be the case that the court would be expanded, like each president would just like keep expanding. I think we talk about, like seriously talk about expanding the courts when the courts are looked as the most out of touch with the public, right? Where like the popularity of the courts fluctuates, like throughout the years. And I think it's like at very specific moments in history that like we have serious discussion about these things, and there's serious political will. There wouldn't be political will necessarily among the the Congress to uh appoint new judges, right? Like that doesn't happen, or new justices. Like if that wouldn't be the case. Like, oh, I guess we're just gonna keep expanding the court. I think there would be a moment where it would happen, right? Like that a president would have to like go through Congress and get the political will to expand it. But then I don't think that necessarily within the next term or the term after that, that that same political coalition will be there. I mean, the fact that we haven't been able to expand the court, and presidents have talked about it, right? Like, so the fact that we
It's been
haven't been able,
threatened.
yeah, the fact, but they can't do it necessarily because they don't have the political will to
Well,
do
well,
this. Isn't that
right.
right?
Well, a huge reason for that is because people are afraid of the mutually assured destruction, right? The ping pong ball effect, where if we do it, they're going to do it next time, and this norm is very strong, and this norm has been established. Because what happened? The reason why I think it's an oversight by the congressional, by the constitutional framers, is because the Supreme Court's not supposed to be responsive to the will of the people. That's not the point, right? They're supposed to interpret the Constitution, and the Constitution has very specific procedures on how it gets amended. So if you want to amend the Constitution, you got to follow the specific procedures set forth by the Constitution to amend that very Constitution.
Yeah.
But if you can pack the court, now you've essentially just amended the Constitution without actually amending the Constitution, right? By putting it, like, you could, if you wanted to, you could put on like very specific hacks that could all interpret something that's like obviously not what the Constitution meant, but they could interpret it to mean something entirely different and get your specific political agenda done contrary to the Constitution without actually having to change the Constitution. I mean, this is a horrible scenario. The reason why I think your proposal has been so interesting is because it seems like you're cognizant of that fact of like, we don't want this to become like a ping pong thing. And so this wouldn't be like one side adds justices, the other side adds justices or whatever. This would be like, we could even keep the ratio at what it is now, but we just make it 50. And then we like work out some system where like a number of people hear it, depending on the case. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to this on like, I guess in terms of destroying the integrity of the court, but I would just be against it in terms of it just seems like it would fuck with the whole it would fuck with the pragmatism, it'd fuck with the consistency. It really does. The more I think about it, right? Like this would be like, well, do we want the same president deciding all of our wars? Why not we have like one person who decides one war, then another president who decides another one, and then we just have them all like we have a council of presidents, and like each one does like one presidential thing. We can even like when the bills come to the presidential office, one president randomly gets selected to sign the bill or to veto the bill. Would you be okay with this?
No.
Why? It's dilution. It's dilution of power. We have one person running the country. That's crazy. We need at least 10 people.
Wait a minute. So like sure, like you can like slippery slope this all you want, right? You can like imagine nonsense like that. But like I don't have to like actually play along. So like I think the court has a very specific place within our government that's unique. And that like the court is the most powerful body, right? Do you agree with that? Or branch?
No, I don't. I think that I think Congress is the most powerful branch for sure because they can just amend the Constitution if the court rules in a way that they. Right, but now it's hard. It's hard to amend the Constitution because you got to get a lot of people.
And it's easy to just like write a ruling within a case, right? Like it's that you
depends what you mean. It depends what you mean by power. I would agree that Supreme Court justices as individuals have tremendous amounts of power, far more than any individual congressperson. I would agree with that.
Okay, fair.
I don't know if more than the president though, because the president can send troops.
Yeah, but which is fair, but like unless we're worried about the president literally like dissolving the court, like using the military to dissolve the court, and like it's not really a thing they have to worry about. I mean, like it could be. I mean, maybe Donald Trump would do that. He might, but beyond that, I don't think that's really a thing they have to worry about. And the president's goals and things that he runs on, like the justices can derail that in a way that Congress can't. Like with Congress, like a president's thing or agenda might not get off the ground. But if you if as the public we put the political will behind electing a president and getting a sympathetic Congress for policy A, right? And policy A goes through, the judges could be like, nah. Like you put all that effort, and it could have been years-long effort, and they collapse it.
If it's unconstitutional, right?
Or if they say it's unconstitutional, they
Right.
say so.
Well, but who else? Like, we have to have somebody say whether or not something's.
I agree.
But
I agree. But like that's what I'm just saying. Reform that institution. So Tiberius.
so we've actually been through this before. Like it literally was to the point of constitutional crisis, and that was during FDR, right?
Yep.
Because FDR literally made the same argument where Prime is like, guys, we've literally sweeped the House, we've sweeped the Senate, we have sweeped the presidency. I'm in my second term now, and like I'm literally if there is anything that this country has ever had for a mandate of governance, we have it. And the Supreme Court was Republican as hell at that point. And he literally goes up to the Supreme Court and says, look, I'm willing to work with y'all at least to some degree, but this shit's out of hand. I will fucking pack the court. I will make you irrelevant as shit if you continue doing what you're doing. Thankfully, the court actually largely just backed down from that fight because they recognized that while there was things that they adamantly disagreed with, there's levels to where it's hard to argue with. What is it? In the 36 elections, the Democrats have 400 people in Congress. Like, damn. Like, that's a lot of representative power behind you. And you're just going to come out as the singular body and be like, nah, we don't care how many people voted for you. We don't care that you're pulling 70%, approval. Fuck you. That was a fight they were going to lose, and they knew it.
And like to back up Ty's point, let's look at the civil rights movement. It like for that to succeed, or in the 60s, right? To succeed the way that it did, it took a confluence of events, right? One, like JFK probably need to get shot. That probably actually needs to happen. For that one, because I don't know if he would have actually had the pull, and the political know-how to like work Congress to make that bill happen. And then two, LBJ used his death as a political motivator to make this to get that through. And LBJ was a smooth negotiator. He understood Congress very well, and he was able to work it, even if like we didn't have an obvious political majority, but we had enough of that. By that political majority, I mean like for this policy to make that to push that policy through. Not like I think the Democrats were in charge at the time. But in any case, like, but to actually make this a reality, you like that majority that he made that happen. He like cobbled that together himself. So there was that, right? And he had like the politicians in place that could be moved, right? But beyond that, there's the court, and the court just happened to be in a configuration that didn't immediately strike this stuff down, right? Because past configuration of the courts would have. Past configuration of the courts, like we're like explicitly white supremacists, like just explicitly so. And so if that happened to be the case, then this not decades, this centuries long movement would have failed, right? And it just so happens to be that it all came together at one point in time. And it just so happens to be that from there the political winds shifted so that like reversing it immediately, in terms of the legislator, was just too difficult. And so like we're on this historical trajectory, but that's just like almost a matter of luck that we had that court configuration, and that's a problem.
You're pointing to the Civil Rights Act, I think, because it's something that you politically agree with. But there's been plenty of instances in which, like, the political will has been adverse to something that we would agree is like a right. So, a great example I can think of, there's been several times in which there's been a movement to ban burning the American flag, make it a crime. That is 4 separate occasions. The federal government's tried to do it. And the Supreme Court has repeatedly stated, no, you have the First Amendment right to ban, to burn a flag. You burn your own flag if you want to, right? This is a situation where the Supreme Court countered the political will in order to protect people's individual rights. We saw this, Brown versus Board of Education, right? If we want to talk about that, where the Supreme Court ruled that under the 14th Amendment, constitutionally, you couldn't have segregated schools. The political will was not in favor of that, right? Especially not in the places where it happened. And so, again, contrary to political will, the Supreme Court said constitutionally, sorry guys, you guys are shit out of luck. I don't care what you all think. This is what the Constitution says. If you don't like it, go change the Constitution, because that's the system that we have in place. And in fact, FDR, I think he's a great example, because when he threatened to pack the courts, he got, and he appointed a lot of justices as well, by the way, because they did back off, and he replaced a lot of them with his own picks. And the Supreme Court that he got to pick through threats of packing and, this tremendous democratic, which he did, right? This tremendous democratic mandate that he has now. He put in one of the worst courts in American history. Not the worst, but it's the same court. FDR put in the court with his mass democratic majority, with his threats of court packing. He put in the court that decided that it was okay to put Japanese people in camps. He was the one who put in the court that in Chaplinsky, a guy called a cop a fascist, got his ass kicked, and that Supreme Court said, well, it kind of serves you right for calling a cop a fascist. This was the court that decided Wickard versus Filburn, right? Which decided that interstate commerce was going to be interpreted in a way that was never been used before to explode federal power in ways that were unprecedented. So you see a lot of negative ramifications happen as well when you don't have a court that's specifically tasked with keeping the country to the Constitution. And does this sometimes mean the majority doesn't get their way? That's the whole point.
No. So the argument that I'm making here, the Supreme Court can be quote unquote tasked to keeping to make sure the country follows the Constitution. They can be tasked to do that. I would agree that's their purpose. The whole point of me bringing up all that was just to illustrate how powerful the court is, and that political will, assembling a political majority, all falls apart in the face of whichever configuration the court happens to be in at the time, and I could, in terms of bad cases, I would say that there's a bunch of other cases that are bad cases. The way I disagree, but that's the point is that my solution doesn't actually address that. That that the court will put out cases I disagree with. It's simply about diluting power. That's it.
So when you say diluting power, okay, you've made it from 9 to 50 in a country of 320 million people. What's to stop this 50, this group? Are things going to substantially change now that we have this group of 50? I guess besides we can leave aside my pragmatic concern about having conflicting decisions happening at the same time. But I don't know. What if 50, a majority of the justices, or all of the justices, strongly agree with a particular legal position that the vast majority of Americans disagree with? That could happen.
Yeah, that's okay. That's not.
What if you have a situation where you have 41 justices that all agree with one thing, and then you have 9 justices who disagree, and every single time by chance you happen to draw the majority of the court, not all 9, but a majority of the court, for 3 very important cases, all happens to be that small minority of the court, and now they control basically all the decisions, those 3 decisions.
Yeah, what if the gods of RNG are against us? I don't know. If you played Baldur's Gate, I'm sure you've cursed those same gods before, but I don't know, what if that's a weird hypothetical. What if out of these 41 there are 9 who believe in it, who have a certain opinion, and they're drawn for cases that are relevant to those opinions, and then they rule on those opinions, and then what are you going to do then, Prime?
No, for sure. Like you have like 50 justices, and then five of them like have like some crazy belief that that I don't know, like the First Amendment does not apply to flag burning. Okay, and then you get a case in flag burning.
The Second Amendment, yeah,
or something like that, or like let's say with the flag burning. Okay, and then you have a case on flag burning, and you happen to draw the five that all agree that it should be illegal to burn the flag, or that it's constitutional to allow a law against burning the flag. And then they get to hear that case.
Yeah, then we'll have another situation where the courts have made a bad decision. Okay, they've made plenty, and they don't stop.
Now you have a minority. Now you have like a tiny minority of the court You have a tiny minority of the court making a terrible position that we basically have to hope we get a better RNG next year.
The tiny minority of the court is in itself a minority of the people.
So it's even minority of a minority
that we have. Yeah. I don't know. Like it seems like a weird reductive problem when the courts itself is like reductive in that same way. That like they are themselves a minority, and five of these people get to boss around the other 330 million of us, and say that their opinion is the law of the land now. Right? We've reviewed the case. This is the opinion of the law of the land. That's the way it is at this moment, right? And they're not like randomly drawn. True, yeah. Even worse, those five people are put there for life, and we have to deal with those opinions, year after year, rather than having a chance of a switch, right? That we have a different configuration of individuals. So
here, let me meet you halfway.
What you're talking about is what we have, but worse.
Let me meet you halfway. I think that this would still raise instability because you're having more new justices with different judicial frameworks deciding things more quickly. But couldn't you accomplish what you're looking for in terms of dilution of power? Just have 81 justices, like tomorrow or whatever. We pass a law, and now 81 justices. We keep the ratio exactly the same. And then when all 81 just decide case one by one by one. Like you don't do this random drawing stuff. You just have like all of the justices all write opinions on each case that comes in front of them.
So I'm a little confused. So 81 people decide on one case. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, per case. Like you would just have it that way.
Why would be the point? What would the point? Because you stipulated that we have to keep the ratio as it is. Then like why?
Because you've removed a lot of RNG, because now instead of being based on RNG, it's somewhat tangentially based on like, the votes that go towards like the Congress and president, who then appoint these justices. As opposed to getting unlucky and drawing the five that happen to believe that like the 13th Amendment didn't apply or some crazy shit, right? I'm not sure I want to risk that. But you'll also have a situation in which now you don't have to worry about the court, like some 9 randomly picked ones deciding one today, and then another 9 deciding something completely different tomorrow. Instead, you'll have some consistency, right? Where you have like the entire Supreme Court consistently voting one case after the other, after the other, after the other. And then, it's already diluted between 81 people. So it's not just 9. That's what you're concerned about. It's 81, even more than the 50 you asked for.
I'm sorry. Then now what we're doing is like, we're expanding it from a justice who has too much power to a faction that has too much power, and that doesn't solve my issue. Like it's like,
why does the randomness?
I guess it does.
Solve
I guess
your
it does
issue?
to a certain extent. Obviously,
yeah.
Right? Because
what about the randomness solves the issue for you, as opposed to just having there be more justices?
Specifically, though, you said more justices with the same ratio of ideologies. I imagine you mean. Right?
Well, yeah. Well, I would assume if we're going to make a change, otherwise, like. The political concern is going to be, well, if you happen to implement this during a Republican administration.
I talked about this last time. You brought this up. This is a really good question you gave to me. And well, my answer to this was we would have each term, right? Each presidential term, they would be able to appoint 5 justices until like the date, like we would get to 50 or whatever the final number would be, right? So, and then after that, once that 50 is in place, then we just like it's maintenance in terms of like people dropping out of the court. Um, right. So like,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. So some kind of like neutral way of doing it, where it like that's the only way it's going to get done, right? And you would also have to like maybe create a lag time, because if you have a situation where like the current administration's Democrat and they're pushing for this, and then they're going to get 5. Oh, don't worry, you'll get the 5 if you win the election next time. They're going to be like, no, we're not going to
yeah.
vote for this
I could see
because
that.
you're
Like,
going to get 5 now.
that, yeah, I could give you that. The president that puts this in place doesn't get to put anyone
Sure.
there beyond the maintenance of like the court as it stands.
Brother, I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't. I don't see this as like a adequate or a practical solving of any problem. But the way you've structured it doesn't make me all that concerned. So if there's enough people that support you, then I'm not going to care that much.
Okay,
It's all right. Fair enough. Right?
See,
We'll have the court be this way.
I have it challenge the status quo here, and so the powers that be, being black to a white man, I won't stand in my way.
I'm not gonna stop you.
I'll take it. I'll take it. So, all right, why don't we move on from there though? Because I'm glad that we got a chance to like dig deeper, and I think your concerns were quite interesting, and something I hadn't considered. So maybe I'll have to put more thought into that. Maybe the arguments that I laid out weren't convincing enough, and it just requires me to put more thinking into this. So I'm going to do that. But yeah, thank you so much. Okay. So the next thing I was thinking or talking about is the role of the federal government. But before I do that, Tiberius or Lactoid, do you guys have anything that you guys want to talk about specifically?
I want to give Ty an opportunity because I got to pee. So
Appreciate that. Nice cover. I do want to square off with you at some point, and we do not have to do this today. On like the bombing of Japan or the nuking of Japan. I do want to have that out with you because like you kicked ass on that panel. You really did. I just wanted to square off with you on that one because there was some things I did like disagree with you on like nuance and context with, but I don't want to litigate that here because we'll be here all night just on that topic. And
God, yeah.
So I do want to talk role of the government because I really do believe I'm probably going to split hairs between both of you.
Please.
Yeah, because you seem to have a lot of priorities that you want to put on the government, both socially and economically.
Mhm.
Lactoid is probably like super like hard on like the government's largely there for social issues, but economically it really needs to keep its hands off. I'm going to kind of split the difference because I think it really needs to have about an even hand in both. We need to like have levels of freedom and like ability to like disagree with each other, but there's also levels to where it's like the government is going to have a social doctrine that it pushes. It's going to take up certain issues and it's going to say, look, we think this is the moral issue. We think this is the right thing to do and we support this. And then when it comes to economics, there's going to be things where we're going to recognize that either the private sector doesn't do it that well, or the private sector is in a particular situation to where certain numbers are not where we want to see it, where people are either not getting fed enough, or more particularly, maybe people are too obese. And it's going to want to push certain economic conditions in certain ways to kind of balance those things out. And I think it's totally adept at doing that.
Okay. So I'm a little confused, and maybe it's maybe I just didn't hear you correctly. So, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
And it just feels like you agree with me more. Like you're saying, you split the difference, and that the federal government, should have hands in both of these pies, being the social and the economic, right? Well, then that just sounds like my position.
I get that. So the way I would split it is I would I would absolutely say that like putting in an economic right or an economic guarantee really jives me the wrong way. So I would never be of the mindset it's like we have to guarantee education or food or any of this shit because I
Okay.
think there's a level where it kind of just breaks down for me. But there is levels to where like it for social stuff, it's a lot easier for me to say we are guaranteeing X because that's something that isn't a commodity. It's not something that you have to put a price point on. It's more of like the battle of internal morals, will, and ideology. And there's levels to where we can just simply kind of come in and say yes or no. That's a lot easier than making sure everyone has, a PlayStation and 30,000 V-Bucks a year. That requires a lot more effort. I'm
Mm,
memeing here a little bit, but they're like this is where I do believe we're going to split the difference. I think Lactoid's going to be a lot more hands off when it comes to economics. There's things where I'm going to probably disagree with him on. It's like no, like the government probably should take an active interest in being like, yo, this shit's way too expensive. We want to encourage people to or businesses to like pull that down through certain subsidies or certain particular buying programs or vice versa where they're like we're going to tax the shit out of this because we don't want people to do it anymore.
okay, so I think it'll just be easier to have this conversation eventually, like when we
Yeah.
have specific examples that we can like bounce off. But first, I want to
Mhm.
give our friend Ty to like lay out his case and what he thinks the role. Sorry, that's actually Ty Lactoid. Lay out the role of the federal government.
So ultimately, all taxation is theft, and government is limited specifically to what I would determine as protecting people's rights. I see it as the enforcer, right? The government is supposed to enforce morality to some extent, as I would define it, on people to ensure that people aren't violating other people. That's how I see it, and you can apply this liberally, right? So, as long as we have this as the basis of what justifies government, you could justify things like police, right? Because the idea is we have to have people go and stop people who are violating the rights of other people. We could justify even to some extent, environmental agencies in terms of, yeah, you're dumping cadmium in my water. This is my property, and you're poisoning me. Like you're aggressing upon me. Someone's got to stop you, and I can't do it because you're Monsanto, and I have you know I own a shed. So the EPA can stop you though, and they probably should. Um, that said, the government has sort of twisted into something completely different at this point. Two-thirds of all federal dollars collected go not towards public projects, they go towards redistribution programs. So you take money from one pocket and put it in the other, right? It's not about roads, even the military, right? The military is counted in that one-third. So even when you factor in the military that we spend a fuck ton on, some would say too much. Um, when you factor in roads, when you factor in infrastructure, when you factor in all that shit, we're not even at a third. Um, there's three programs alone that make up more than half the federal budget: Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. Uh, those are alone, those three. And then you have a whole fuck ton on top of that as well. When you look at graphs of government spending as a percentage of GDP in the United States, it has consistently gone up, and it's gone up by a lot, okay, compared to where it was. Looking at, especially after COVID, right? A lot of graphs stopped before COVID, but then when you look at the graphs that include COVID, we're talking incredible amounts of government spending as a percentage of GDP. And most of that is federal. Most of the growth is federal. And I think that part of the problem here and why I'm generally skeptical of the federal government is because it tends to grow the most because it can diffuse the most costs among a larger population, and also because it commands absolute authority as opposed to the state governments that are subordinate to the federal government. So state government is somewhat limited in what they can do because the feds can come stop them. But who's going to stop the feds? No one's going to stop the feds because they're the feds. Um, the fact that there's, it's sort of the federal government's a self-checking mechanism um, that has ultimate power. The fact that it's grown the most, the fact that it has, obviously demonstrated the most aggression in terms of a hawkish foreign policy. The fact that it is responsible now, I guess I already talked about in terms of growth of spending. Um, the fact that its agencies seem to be, I think we talked about this a little bit last time, Prime, but its agencies seem to be very interested in what I would consider just qualitatively Orwellian projects, like the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, right? These sort of like, they the black site operating, mind control developing, fucking like glowies that are like tasked with like trying to infiltrate like the American mind and control you. It's fucking crazy. And they deny this, and then like the NSA has to come out and apologize and be like, yeah, I guess we were doing all this. We were spying on everybody. We were spying on our allies. Um, Taken as a full picture, I'm skeptical of all government, but taken as a full picture, the federal government seems to uniquely be a problem. And it's why I'm most skeptical of that, and why I want to have there be really, I want to relegate the federal government to like a role of like I mean, all government, but especially the federal government, to solely enforcing rights and making sure that states don't violate people's rights while otherwise letting states do what they want.
Just quick question before we jump into it.
Yeah.
And I think you might have just answered it, but do you think that in Blacktoid's ideal world, that the federal government should be above the state government, or not?
Yeah, I think it needs to be for sure. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like there are power. I almost hate to reference it, but like power dynamics, right? Where with great power comes great responsibility, and should come great skepticism, right? The more powerful power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The more power you give something, the more you should be afraid of it, not the less you should be afraid of it. And so if you have something that has absolute power over everybody, that should mean that like, yeah, we need to have you here, right? Like the teacher needs to be in the position that they're in. But that means there's certain rules on you now, right? If you're going to hold this power, we don't want you doing XYZ because we're afraid of you. Because the whole point is that you have the power that we should fear, right? You control the most technologically advanced, most powerful military on the face of the planet that the world has ever seen. The United States could end the world tomorrow. I mean, the level of power here that we're talking about is just is mind blowing, and that's something to be feared, not just respected, but feared down to its core, because it doesn't always operate within the light, right? I mean, the NSA and CIA have done shit and I promise you are doing shit right now that you and I have no idea about.
100%.
And right? I mean, oh, Jesus Christ. It's just, I think about like, what have they done that we just don't think they've done? And then, we don't want to get into conspiracy theories because they start sounding crazy.
I'm going to say this because I know it. I wish that people realize that if any one of you out there who was like listening into this has ever sent like a nudie pic or a dirty pic, you are not the only person who's seen it. Straight up.
The fucking feds, dude.
No, like literally the feds see all of that. All of them, all the time.
Sure, I just want to put back because I agree that the Fed, the NSA, was according to, I'm not sure which leaks was it Snowden leaks or whoever, but like they are hoovering up our information, and that they have access to all these things, but whether someone has actually seen it, that's a different thing, right? Like we would have to have like an equal number of federal agents to the population to actually watch. Like
we're all federal, the federal government. We're all federal agents now.
Yeah.
There's some good news on this one. Like 99% of the shit they collect, they can't store. Like there's just like they would literally information overload immediately, even with the amazing information storage that we have today. What is horribly concerning actually is private sector. It's what Facebook is able to collect on you that I think people really need to talk about, because we've demonstrated this before in the regards that like Target can now collect information on you so well that they can largely tell if people are pregnant before they even know. Like they literally can recognize your spending patterns change enough to where they can tell if women are pregnant. It's mind-boggling.
Okay.
It's kind of basic.
So I thought you brought up a lot of interesting things, but both of you brought up a bunch of interesting things. So I wrote some stuff down, and let's see if we can address them. Um, so you say, and I don't want to take too much time in interrogating this sentence, but that taxation is theft. Okay. So like, I hear you. All right, but you still say that
And
we
you
should.
agree, right?
You still say we should have federal agencies, though, right? You brought up the EPA and whatnot. How do we fund those agencies?
Yeah. So, and this is this is a very good question. Um, m- the likes of Scott would absolutely disagree with what I'm about to say, and they would label me a communist and despise what I'm about to say. Okay, but
Scott
this
can
is
go
what
to
I think.
hell. Yep. Yeah.
This is what I think.
So it must be sane. Got it.
Stealing is wrong, but there are situations that I think you can justify stealing. And in terms of like an actual analysis, sitting down and justifying every dollar you steal, if you can specifically do it on what I would consider to be a consent calculus, right? Are you getting more out of it in terms of protecting people's rights than you're putting into it? Then I think you could justify it. So an example of this would be like if you had to steal like $1 from everybody to hire a cop that goes and stops rapists, like yeah, you are stealing the money, no doubt. Okay, and that's a wrong thing that needs to be justified in of itself, right? And so when we're arguing, okay, we have this pile of money now that we've stolen from everybody. How are we going to spend it? Well, if this has moral weight now, this money, so it better be spent right, and it better be spent efficiently, and it better be spent on something that's justified. Well, hiring the cop to go stop the rapist, right? That's justified because rape is very non-consensual, even what I would deem to be much more so than just stealing $1 from you. So, if you take this analysis every single time, you can begin to justify some government programs, like a sort of minimal level of government that is tasked with accomplishing specific goals and facilitating interaction between private people in a way in which people have their rights protected. Um, The problem is that this doesn't mean that you can steal money and then not justify it, right? And a very like a simple way to think about this, it's not perfect, but one of the ways that I like to think about it is whenever you say the government should spend money on something, ask yourself personally, would you go steal money from somebody to pay for that? Right? That's the first question you should ask yourself, right? So if somebody's starving, would you go steal money to give them food? Maybe, right? There's a real conversation to be had there. Would you go steal money to pay down your student loans, Prime?
Pay down my student loans.
Yeah.
I couldn't justify to pay down my student loans. I could justify for uh using the our collective that collective cash to uh invigorate the economy by like unleashing the full power of our youth by giving them a chance at higher education so that they can be fully activated citizens, and then give back to that economy, generate more, economic activity uh, through their actions they might not have been able to accomplish otherwise without a college degree, and doing so in a way that uh, is more sufficient rather than their initial years out of college being spent paying down loans. They're instead putting money, generating money, and putting that into useful areas of the economy. So I could do it. I could justify it that way, not like for me, like stealing money, as you put it, for me.
But would you steal money? Let's say you knew some kid down the block that like had like a lot of college student debt. Of course, they had a relatively high income, like most of people with college student debt. Um, and and they're sitting on like they're making money, but they're sitting on debt. You wouldn't steal money for their benefit, right? Even if it turns out that like left them more money to go spend on other things. Like, would you steal money to give to them?
I see the problem is when you're reducing these things to an individual. If it was an individual debt, I think that completely changes the calculus. When we're talking about like a population and like and having an over like having a purpose that is beyond like the action in of itself. So meaning that like yes, the action would be like getting rid of debt, but there's a purpose beyond that, right? It's not just like any debt. It's not like, for instance, car debt. You know, like a car loan debt. I mean, those are both debts, and they could be equal, right? Like you could have like a I don't know $20,000 car loan, $20,000 student debt loan, right? But we're not talking about getting rid of the car loans. We're talking about the student loans because there's a specific purpose behind that, and which will have like different types of economic activities. That's why I can justify the one rather than the other. Does that make sense?
Well, I understand like the arguments that you put forward in favor of forgiving student loans, but what I'm saying is that I guess from my perspective,
I mean, I
on
wouldn't
what,
have student loans in the beginning. That money, the more effective way
sure.
is to just guard the economy.
Well, I understand,
right?
but like assuming we have student. Sorry, go ahead, Ty.
Oh, I appreciate that. I want to get in here before we completely get off the point because the student loans are a fun conversation. But like for me, like this is where I really do want to push back against Lactoid because while there's levels where I get like how coercive and how powerful like government institutions are and how we want to limit that, when it comes to like taxation as theft, like the issue that I have here is largely that while it is openly either coercive or simply a rejection of your individual consent, which I get why the libertarians cannot fucking cope with that shit, the reality, at least for me, is that you are exchanging basically non-compliant rent with the service of the protection of the sovereign. And I don't think a lot of people who don't understand history realize how big of a deal that is. While you are having to give up some levels of your economic well-being and your own personal like ability to make your own conscientious decisions, you get a standard rule set which you largely are given like as a notice. This is the rules you all play by, so you don't have to like fight over fucking everything. And more particularly is that you have a common economic rule set to where you can build out economies of scale well easier because you have like particularly the rule of law to where you know if you do X thing, you get sued for it or you get fined for it. That's incredibly powerful, and I think a lot of people do not recognize. If you look at where we've gone through history, not having those things are horrible.
I don't disagree that to some extent, like the protection is probably like one of the only things. There's other things, I suppose, but the protection. Actually, to be honest, I think protection might be one of the only things that's justified in terms of government action, right? I get it, right? Like there is some level of stealing that happens to you. Now you called it, I think, non-consent,
like compulsory rent, non-consenting rent,
yeah. Right. Which, you know, we can have a discussion about, you know, this sounds just like, you know, what a mobster would say, you know, they're coming in the neighborhood, like, you know, hey, protection money. Yeah. Hey, protection money, right? I mean, this is literally what it is, right? It's protection money. You want to live in our neighborhood, you got to pay the rent, right? And they're going to show up with baseball bats and crowbars. And like, they expect you to like hand over a payment. The government is just a big that, okay? They're just a big protection racket that we've decided, well, like we got to be very afraid of them, just like we're generally afraid of protection rackets. But it turns out like there's a bunch of other gangs out there that are very scary. And so we need some level of like protection racket in place to prevent rackets, to protect us from the other protection rackets and to protect us from, you know, enemies foreign and domestic.
I will 100% like go like into the memes on this one. Yes. I'm fine with it because there is like the reality is that at least to me, it's a blatant acceptance of either you deal with the demon that you understand and know, and what we've got a lot of experience with dealing with government now, or you literally kind of just evolve into lordism. Like this is the literal reason I can't be an anarchist. Like so me and Lactoid agree on that one. Like the part where I get it is that the protection clause is where it gets hairy. Because I can say I'm protecting you, therefore you have an army and police. I can also say I'm protecting you, so I'm going to guarantee you food because I'm depriving you of like the horrors of reality, right? Like we can make sure that you have food. We can protect you from like starvation. And there's levels to where that scares the hell out of me because economic goods are not social goods. They are completely separate. They function differently. And like, I am far less scared of the government playing social curator than I am the government playing economic curator.
You could be afraid of both, right? Like I can imagine one. I mean, unless you want
Absolutely.
to. I mean, like so. For I guess the historical example that I think we're all thinking about, and the classic example that I use whenever anybody which nobody has today, but whenever people bring up the point, well, like you live here, so you consent to the law. Jim Crow was social enforcement by the government to some extent, which I think we all agree is like. But I guess it was also economic, right? So, how do you separate social and economic here? Seems
Yeah.
like almost.
So there is levels to where they're always obviously going to be tied at the hip, right? Because your social well-being can actually be strongly infectious of your economic well-being and vice versa. However, like there is things that you can kind of look in a vacuum. You can recognize the price of automobiles and go, all right, is this actually in a position where we want it to be? Are these things too cheap? Are they too costly? I'm actually going to make the argument that food actually is not too cheap. It's not too expensive. It's too cheap because we waste 40 fucking percent of it. Like there's levels to where I think government should have a hand in going, all right, I don't want to guarantee this where we just ban everything or that we just come in and guarantee anything, but I definitely think it should have a vested interest in me. And like, all right, the price point of this is X, and we want it to be up or down 20-30% because we want to encourage certain economic and social repercussions from that.
Well, we could. I mean, first we should start with ending the subsidies, but
Well, I was going the other way with that, but okay.
Well, ending food subsidies, then the price goes up.
Okay, fair enough.
Cheap, right? But with Tiberius, would you agree though? Even if you agree that there's some level of like stealing that we need to pay the protection racket, we can also reasonably say that like the protection racket taking money from us is like in of itself a bad thing. And so if they're spending that money on like protecting us when we need it, okay, like we have this need that's being fulfilled by pretty like uncomfortable means, but hey, the need has to be fulfilled. But when the line starts crossing into not needs anymore, but like, $80 Air Force mugs, right? Where we start crossing into that territory where it's like, wait a minute, what the fuck? Like, do you agree something immoral is happening? Like whenever the government wastes money, I see that as like a moral tragedy, actually, whenever they're wasting money.
I kind of get where you're going with this one, and there's levels to where, like, at its face, I get where, like, even the anarchists have a point. Like it's openly coercive. It literally is like legalized extortion. Like I can look at it from that framework and go, okay, there's something like inherently immoral about like government as an institution. The problem is like it's where morality seems to go to die in terms of it loses all practical sense. What you give up, in my opinion, for most government interactions is totally fucking worth it. However, what is really concerning, where I really agree with libertarians, are does government like to get its hands in pots that it really fucking shouldn't? Like, I'm 100% behind, what do we call it? Where government sets the rules and then the corporations are able to, like, go ham on it. Regulatory capture. Shit like that. Like, scares the hell out of me, bothers the hell out of me. I get it. The other side of that is that you definitely want shit like monopoly protection, so you don't have that. Or if you're gonna have that, you have to have the arm of the state really ready, willing, and able to come beat it in the head. I think the power company still gets away with some really ridiculous shit, straight up. And don't even get me started on telecommunications. There are levels to where I totally get where people and institutions and these governments should be able to collect taxes and make sure that you aren't going to get invaded. I think that's obviously the one that we all can agree on. But there's also levels to where, should government be there to set you back up when a hurricane wipes out half your fucking state? Yeah, I probably think that's actually one of the things that it would be the best at. But apparently we don't want to worry about it. We rather worry about funding old folks.
You go first.
I guess two things. First of all, to some extent, I'm actually like very unhappy with the way the government deals with disasters, right? Like, especially because they've become predictable, and they become predictable in a way now where the entire country subsidizes people to live in certain areas, right? So, if people had to pay the cost of living in Florida, they would pay higher insurance premiums, right? But they don't do that, right? I mean, they pay a little bit higher insurance premiums, obviously. But what happens is FEMA swings by every year when some massive hurricane hits and dumps tremendous amounts of money into Florida, money that people should be paying an insurance company for. And the whole country basically subsidizes people living in Florida. Um, and other places, you're just expected to eat the cost, right? So, like, people have to buy heating appliances in my state or in the north. Why do we have to pay for that, right? That's just that's one of the weather negatives of living here, but we pay for that when the federal government through FEMA pays Florida through their negative health weather outcomes.
I'm not sure that they do though, or at least I'm not. So like I was like nodding my head until like you brought up FEMA. So like you and Scott have like moved me on this issue. You guys moved me on a few things, but you've moved me on this particular issue in terms of like the price of living in these disaster prone areas. It's something I've brought up many times over the years. Like what are we gonna do with a changing climate? Where like these disasters become more and more predictable and regular, as you've completely brought up. Um, and like it kind of like made sense to me the way, like you said, like the market could just deal with this, and that it could price people out of it, and we should like so like what you've talked about, like the price controls on insurance, that those
Yeah,
insurance companies are leaving Florida because they can't charge what they need to charge
that's
the
right.
people for that, right? Like that kind of makes sense to me. I would like a kinder, gentler way to help people deal with this changing climate rather than leaving it up to the to the cold carrying hands of the market. But still, um, like I kind of like that, to say that like, okay, well, if you're going to assist in living here, that's fine. But you got to pay for that. But you brought up FEMA instead, and when FEMA doesn't dump that much money, right? Like, and it doesn't actually cover the cost of these disasters. We see time and time again, like Congress doesn't allocate enough money for these things. And so you hear from people who are survivors of these different disasters, and they tell you that they got like a $1,200 check, tremendous amount of money, right? You sure a lot of people got a $1,200 checks, but like obviously not enough to make them whole. Like if you lost a house or some shit, you know. And so I wouldn't say FEMA would be the problem. I would want a strengthened FEMA to help people when disaster like does hit, because at that point in time, once it's already happened, we need to be able to help people to get on their feet, like so that we don't like just throw them in generational poverty because they happen to get hit with a hurricane. But beyond that, like if we're encouraging people to move out of the state or move out of certain areas, like that beachfront housing has to go, then the market I think might be a good way of making that happen. Um, so I wanted to and do you have an immediate response to that? Because there are other things I wanted to say.
I
Or
got
like,
something I
Um,
want to add, but go ahead.
okay,
yeah, no, go ahead, Ty.
fine.
Yeah, so like when it comes to the market, we can get into the weeds on like what we would say is disadvantage or poor behavior, but it is really, really good at discouraging certain behaviors. We can like clearly acknowledge that where like certain shit gets into a price point where no one wants to do it, then like no one fucking does because it's just literally not worth it. And that's something that I really like markets for. The problem is that like there's obviously a conversation on, hey, should you live in Oklahoma in that 7% chance that your house is wiped out by a tornado, right? Because we can compare that and say, all right, yeah, it's probably worth it. We can cover those folks. But then we're like, hey, there's a 30% chance you're going to lose your house if you live in Florida because you're going to get hit by a hurricane all the time. Yeah, like there's levels to where that gets hairy. What I'm just trying to put out here is that the market's really good at just pushing people away from shit that is just completely not worth it. But there is levels to where should we let the market do whatever the fuck it wants? Hell no. So like, yeah, I just wanted to get that out there.
So I wanted to go back to something Lactwood said. a while ago, and you talked about how the government should be used as a tool. It should use like policy as a tool to um, encourage morality, right? Or along
Or
those lines.
to enforce it, not to
Enforce
encourage it.
morality. Okay, sure. Which means that we could take a moral stance as a collective government and then enforce that morality on people with policy.
Well,
Right?
to be clear, so there's no I guess good way to say this, but what I mean by morality is very clearly like my morality. Like I want my perception of government is that it only exists to enforce rights, and for me, like rights means a very particular thing, right? You specifically, do you consent to this thing happening to you or not? If you don't consent to some kind of infraction upon you, some kind of aggression upon you, somebody messing with your shit, now we're talking about them violating your rights. Okay, and so then at that point the calculus is just like do we get less of that if we steal some money and hire the right people to stop that from happening? And if we can't justify it, like if we can't do the math and justify the cop, right? Let's say we have too many cops, and when we look at the overall price tag, like we're just not, it's just not, it doesn't justify itself. The government at that point has a moral obligation to cut their police force because they are not spending the stolen money efficiently.
I guess I could sign on to that last part. But
Just because that's you're the cops, right?
no, not just because it has to do with the cops. No, but like what you've been saying before about like the government has more obligation to spend the money wisely and not waste the money. I agree that's true. It's just that you and I are going to disagree on what's wasteful.
Oh, we are, and this is why, and I think Ty might too, and this is why I have the ultimate like question for you guys here. Back when I was talking about like you have to independently justify it. Like if you personally wouldn't steal for it, it's probably not a good thing to have the protection racket go and steal for it. Let's talk about retirement, right? Social Security, one of the top 3 federal programs. Why is it okay for the government to to steal money from me to pay for the retirement of somebody else, even let's say if they are like not destitute, right? Let's say they have like a suburban house or they have like a high income house. Why should I be having my money taken out of my paycheck to go to them? Is that something that you personally would steal for?
Well, let Ty go first.
Damn, I had a candy bar in my mouth. Okay, I'm trying to do this from the side. I don't like the way that you morally frame, like, you know, is this something I would steal for? Like, but let me just roll with it just for the sake of context, right? It's really close. Like, I absolutely think that in some ways a society should at least value its senior leadership, or at least its seniors in general. The problem is, and everyone knows this from who's talked to me, I fucking hate our seniors because I don't believe that they deserve any credit to the livelihoods that they've led. Like if I was, I'm sorry, like if I literally was ever going to accused of bigotry, it would be towards boomers. But that's a whole other conversation. All I'll say is this. It's either that you morally justify it because you say, hey, look, I am going to provide you a guarantee of at least some modicum of retirement because your body is completely shot, or is probably likely because you've worked 40 years. Versus, you know, you're going to have to pay for it now, but you will get it at some point, and you can justify in that way. It's there for everybody. You just have to take it on the chin when you're young, but you get the benefits of it later. The other side of this is simply morally, I think it's actually unjustified personally, because what it actually comes down to is that if you are a elder and you have gotten to the point where you are at the point of retirement and the society has not allowed you to flourish and prosper to the degree where you can secure a modicum of retirement under your own aegis, that's not an indictment of you, that's an indictment of the society writ large. Because maybe there might be an outlier here or there of people who are going to fall through the cracks who just can't afford the retirement. But the fact that you live, or we do, in the most wealthy country in human existence, and we can't make it to where people can afford to retire on their own means, yeah, the system's fucked.
So, uh, I think again, this is about like what's wasteful and what's moral. I absolutely think that as a society, like we want better out. I want better outcomes for people in general. Better economic, better social outcomes, and like a better outcome is that a person doesn't have to work until they're dead. Um, that at some point we decide that our elders, as our friend Ty put it, have done enough, and they can live the rest of their life in some sort of relative comfort. And that is something worth putting money behind. I think our tax code is a moral code, right? It shows the priorities of our society, and uh, like in our budget as well. Those things are obviously tied. Um, and I think as a society, it simply makes sense that we want these people to be comfortable. They're a vulnerable population. As you get older, you become more vulnerable, and we should take care of them. I think that should happen regardless of their where they landed in the socioeconomic system, because one, that can change, right? Even if you land like upper middle class by 65, it doesn't mean you'll stay that way. Um, and I think that when you put up structural barriers uh to these things, not structural barriers, but uh when you put up bureaucratic barriers to these things, then people fall off through the cracks. I want to help the maximum amount of people possible, and also I want to protect these gains, because I understand we live in a political context, and that if you make it so that it is dependent on factors. Like if it's not a universal program, then it's easier to attack. And then we if it is attacked, we can lose it, and then no one gets help. So like that's why I don't give a crap that Bill Gates gets like I don't know some check, some level of check for Social Security. Like I don't care about that. I feel like that level of quote unquote waste is minor compared to the massive amount of people it helps, and that changing that system would endanger that system, and then no one would get help, so it'll be a worse outcome. There's that. So you can spawn like to it. I did want to take this place, this moral place to a certain area, but like you want to respond to what I
Yeah, well, this is totally relevant to my belief in the role of the federal government as well. So, Social Security is one of the biggest disasters in terms of a policy proposal, and people laud it as one of the most successful ones, right? Um, First of all, it robs people of their agency, right? Every single paycheck, I get some percentage of my paycheck taken out and against my will put for my retirement, which I may never see, right? Living until the retirement age is somewhat of a dice roll. Not everybody lives to be 67, or I guess 62 if you're talking about the early retirement age. And the people who don't get to live that long, perhaps they wanted to spend that money now for whatever
That's how
purpose they have.
insurance works, though, right? To
I
be clear.
understand. You're right, but insurance is consensual. Social Security is not. And so if I have to, I'm being forced to pay into this essentially insurance program, where now against my will, I'm not consciously taking this making this decision, but assuming that I live long enough to take some of it out, perhaps I might be able to take some of it out. If I have the as an agent, as an adult, I want to spend that money now on myself. Maybe I value a house or a car or entertainment now
Or hookers.
more than, or you know what, in libertarian paradise, or hookers. Okay, whatever you happen to spend your money on, not my business. I wouldn't be doing that, but
Certainly not. These libertarian people don't do it. Definitely not.
no,
But
no.
it
So
supports the rights.
so so that's the first reason why it's bad. And the second reason why it's bad, and I think this is a lot of people don't know this, right? But not only does it rob people's agency to put their money into like immediate needs or wants, it robs people from putting it into retirement. A recent analysis, I can post this, by the Federal Reserve of St. Louis found that for 98% of all people, if they took the money that was being taken from them and put in Social Security, for 98% of people, if they had simply put that in the stock market, they would have more money. Even if they put part of it in bonds, like for a safer investment, or part of it in bonds and part of it in like ETFs or these kind of like safe stock market investments, they would have much more money than Social Security, right? It's true that when you put money in Social Security, right, like you will get money out if you live long enough. But it's important to look at what kind of money are we talking, right? Is it money that you can transfer to your kid? Sometimes, right? There's survivorship benefits, but that isn't always the case. And it's certainly you're not going to get all the money back that you put in, right? First of all. And second of all, again, Social Security, when you put money into it, it's not growing with the rest of the economy. So it's being eaten away by inflation, which, has been super high. 98% of people, if they chose to put it in the market instead, if they got to keep it, they would make more money. So not only is the government forcing me to have a long-term horizon for my well-being, but they're doing it in a bad way. They're inefficient. And so that goes back to my original perspective of, unless you can really morally justify the government doing something, like it shouldn't happen. And in this case, you have the government mandating my time horizon for how I want to spend my labor and my money. And they're doing it in a way that's making 98% of people lose out. Like,
So
what a terrible policy.
I would disagree with this because I think that the problem is I haven't seen the study that you're talking about, but like one, I believe you in terms of results. But I think that it's because of people like you who want to dismantle that system that we can't expand that system to accommodate for exactly what you're talking about. So like there's that, but I'll leave that alone for now because this is not where the direction I wanted to go. So I think as a libertarian, the rights that you want to protect, right? That would include the right to be able to purchase private property.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would say that any citizen of the country, we'll just keep it to citizens because I don't know how would you feel about immigrants, so let's not pull on that one. Pull on that thread.
Well, ultimately, nations are unjustified. So ideally, we wouldn't have the concept of citizen, but we have to protect from other, from the communists specifically. So I'm concerned about.
All right, that might be another conversation that we need to dig into. But in any case, so citizens should have the right to have private property, and you would say that the government should defend that right if it's threatened.
Yeah.
Okay. What if not everyone has an equal chance, right? Assuming they have the cash, right? That an equal chance to exercise that right to purchasing private property. The government should step in.
Well, hold on.
Like equal chance on the market, like how the market's supposed to function. Like, yeah. Like
I guess, can you give me an example?
Sure. Yeah. Well, perfect example.
I know it's going to be, but go ahead.
Of course, you know it's going to be. Black people, right? Housing. Like let's pretend that Prime has money, right? Let's live in that fantasy world. Sub to the channel. But if I did and I had enough for to buy a house in a certain neighborhood, but I was kept out. Let's say that the real estate agent doesn't show me certain neighborhoods, right? Because they're just not right for me, or like there is some sort of scheme, covenant, I don't know, to keep me out of these neighborhoods, or whatever, right? That like, yes, I have the right to buy private property. That's true, but I can't. But that my right is inherently less than your right to do so. Like my ability to exercise that. So you would say that the government should have a place in dealing with that, right? Defending my rights.
No.
Okay, there you go.
So let me explain. and this is kind of like a crude analogy, but it makes sense to me, where like a market, when we talk about markets, a market is just, in my mind, an amalgamation of individual people consensually interacting with each other. And that term consensually interacting is like incredibly important. So not only does this determine what people do, but it also determines who people do things for. So part of the market includes the fact that, like, I don't know, you have businesses that will refuse to serve people who show up without a shirt. No shirt, no shoes, no service, right? You'll have situations where people will
I think that was like an
refuse.
anti-hippie thing,
It
apparently.
was an anti-hippie thing for sure,
Yeah.
yeah. And you have people who, I don't know, will refuse to do business with people that rub them the wrong way, right? In terms of like some kind of contract or some kind of negotiation. And it's sort of like, I almost view it kind of like sex. Okay, let's bring it to that.
Sure,
You have the
please.
right. You have the
Crime
right
is
to
also
have
horny.
sex.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have the right to have sex, right? The government's not going to stop you, but you don't have the right to have sex. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have the
Yeah.
right to sex, but if you can't convince someone to give you sex,
These
kind
are
of shit out of
negative
luck.
and positive rights we're talking about, right? Is that the
So
concept? Right?
yeah, this is what people, right? So there's this dichotomy that people put forward of the concept of positive and negative rights. The issue is, I think positive rights are like very shaky, because you can basically argue for anything using positive rights in a way that really doesn't feel like a right. So like one example could be, I have a right to my private property, my wallet. So I have a right to not have somebody come steal my wallet. That person running over to steal your wallet could say, well, I have the right to live in a world in which I get to have your wallet, or I have a right to live in a world in which I am not walletless. And I don't have a wallet right now, so you're giving me yours. Well, now we have a very clear contention here, right? We have the difference between me and my wallet, and we have somebody who's now claiming they have some sort of right to my wallet. We have the dichotomy between the incel, who claims he has a right to some woman's body, and the woman who has a right to her body, right? We have we have the dichotomy between me and like the chairs that I personally manufactured, and somebody who wants to buy those chairs, right? And so the question is, who ultimately has the right over that property? And for me, the right to that property comes from whether or not you made it, whether or not ultimately it's yours, right? It comes from your body, right? You are your mind, you are you own your body, and you own the things that come from your body.
What
And
about like a house that like you didn't make, you just bought?
well, but the thing is, again, you can only consensually buy it, and so the reason why you have rights over that house is because the people who built that house gave it to you. If you stole the house, it's not yours. If
Yeah.
I go out in the middle of the woods and build the house myself, we can all agree that's my house, right? If I,
Yeah.
chop down the wood, fucking drill the net, like the nails, screws, whatever the fuck, build a house, that's mine, right? Well, if I build the house and it's mine, I can do whatever I want with my house because it's mine. So I could sell it, I can exchange it, I can trade it with somebody for, let's say, 8 cows, because I want to start a cow ranch now. So I'm going to go off and build a cow ranch. Well, they didn't build a house, but it's their house because I built it and I gave it to them, right? So you follow the transfer of ownership. This was a philosophy that was espoused by Robert Nozick. So, you know, stemming from your body, that's more John Locke, right? But the idea of what makes something justified is whether or not every single time it's changed hands was that consensual, right? Did they trade that to somebody for exchange for something, or give that for free, or whatever the fuck? And for me, that's how you build a society in which people are having their rights respected the most.
Okay, so none of this addresses like the examples I gave, like at all. So
It does, just not. It's just biting the bullet.
no, hold on. No, All right. So I talked about a real estate agent who doesn't show me certain houses, right? Like where's the consent being violated there of like the property owner, like when I don't even get a chance to even look at the house. I'm not presented as a prospective buyer because again, like I'm just not a good fit for that area. Like we'll start with that one. Like where is the consent being violated?
Well, so in the situation in which the realtor is just like, I guess, the realtor is a bad example because realtors most of the time are independent agents, and they can more or less design, like if they want to design their like what they do. Obviously within law currently, but assuming these laws didn't apply, realtors like the homeowner hires the realtor to try to sell the house.
Mm-hmm.
If the homeowner is unhappy with the realtor and their effort to sell the house, they can fire them in terms of I'm not going to work with you anymore, and I'm going to go find a realtor to sell my house.
But
And the realtor is free to do whatever they want in the meantime.
Yeah, that doesn't matter in terms of how I'm structuring this, because let's assume we have a non-racist, right? Like, or Ty is selling his house, right? And I'm assuming Ty is not a bigot, right? We're gonna dice roll there. But Ty is like looking for the best price. That's all he cares about, the best price on his property, and he's willing to sell to anyone. And the real estate agent, unbeknownst to him, is only putting certain buyers in front of him, right? Ones that match his skin color. And like, he may get the best price, like, of that selection, or he may not. He won't know. There's no way for him to know because he doesn't see the widest selection of buyers that they see, right? He only sees what is presented to him. And so if she is curating the list, right, then like that possibly hurts Ty, but also it hurts me as a buyer who doesn't even get a chance to put in a bid.
Right. So, and only the rules here that I would enforce would be laws against fraud. So like if Ty doesn't care who he sells to, he would go to the realtor and say, okay, I want you to sell to the top bidder regardless of their race. Do you agree? And the realtor will say yes, right? Boom, contract. Now, if the realtor sells to not the highest bidder, she's violating the contract and she can be sued, right? And then what you can do is when you're going to realtors, you can ask, hey, like, you're not going to discriminate against me based on my race, right? Like, you're just going to show me like the best houses. And if they say, yes, I'm not going to discriminate against you, and it turns out that they do, boom, I think you should be able to sue them based on fraud. But if they tell you, I am a brazen racist and I do not want to sell you a house, I'm not in the business of trying to force that realtor to sell you a house. I think you need to find a better realtor.
Okay. So, all right. Wow.
I, as a realtor, would sell a house to anybody of any color, creed, as long as they were the top bidder. Okay?
He would only, of course, my friend Lack.
Money is green. Green is the only color to discriminate against.
Whenever he gets to the subject, he wants to make that clear.
That he's crystal not clear.
He just wants to. You'll just defend them to the bitter end. But no, okay, so I might come back to that specific example in a second, but I'm just gonna move off that for just a quick second and say, like, what if we have a situation, let's just pretend hyperbolic, right? That all realtors or whatever property owners or wherever the blockage is refuse to sell to black people within this nation. Right, that there's no place that can go to get a house. Right, I have the right, according to you, to buy private property, but because of my skin color, I am like 100% locked out of the market. Do you think that's a perfectly fine state of affairs?
Again, like when you say you have the right to private property, yeah, you have the right to
engage the market, and I cannot engage the market.
No, not necessarily, right? So again, like let's say you have the guy that lives in the town where no women will fuck him. Does he have a right to have sex with a woman?
Yeah, he does have the right to engage. But
he has no access, right? Nobody will do it.
Nobody will do it. Sorry, I don't want to. Sorry,
this is the analogy, though, right? It's the same thing with,
but
like,
I want to focus in on the one because like everyone always distracts from this, but like I want to deal with the morality of this point. Like deal with that, and then we'll move forward.
No, I'm explaining the morality. Like when I say you have a right to private property, what that means, what I guess to be more specific, you have a right to yourself and to the things that you create and the things that you trade for. And you have a right to have those things without somebody else coming and interfering with you, whether it be a criminal, whether it be the government, as much as we possibly can do it, or whether it be, the mob or anything else, right? Like that's your shit. This is your body. This is your property. It should be left alone as much as possible.
Yeah. So
you don't have a right to a yacht, but if you own a yacht, you have a right to a yacht.
This is what we're running into. We're running into the same issue that like of what is waste, what is morality, because like I just fundamentally disagree with like your sense of morality.
I don't think you
And
do
so
though. Like you would agree with the guy who no woman will fuck.
no,
You
no,
agree
come
that he
on.
just he's a shit out
I
of luck,
don't
right?
care about this example, right? Like I like this is why I brought up um the um the real estate thing, right? Because that has specific real world implications, and it's a practical example of a thing that happens to this day.
Incels are real.
Yeah, sure, okay. So I when you talk about like the government enforcing morality, I would say that equity is a morality. You talked about wealth redistribution. You thought that this is a horrible thing that was happening.
Oh,
But I think the government should push forward a society, a morality, like push us in a direction that maximizes the well-being of everyone, and their ability to engage with the larger culture and economy and all those things, to be fully activated citizens. And so like wealth redistribution makes sense to me. Yeah, let's do that. Let's especially do that when we're talking about people whose rights have been historically violated. Let's put programs in place that give them redress for harm done, and allow them to like like access the market or whatever, or other resources, um, uh, in a manner that's equitable to others, like and not equal to others, equitable to others. And there's a difference there. So, but like you disagree, right? You disagree on that. So, like, it's just a problem we're just gonna constantly be running into. Um, do Ty, did you want to say something?
I have plenty to say on this one, but Lactoid's probably prompted.
No, Ty. I mean, I feel like
Okay.
I kind of laid out the reasons why I disagree with it, but I want to hear.
Yeah. So when it comes to your year two's morality, I will absolutely outline that you do not line up on the ethics of harm reduction. You guys are not on the same page there. Like your moral structures are different. So like if you guys don't morally like agree with each other, like for one, that's obvious to me, but also two, I think that's okay. What's really where this conversation really goes for me is that sorry, I'm losing my point. Well, the last thing you guys talked about was sorry, I needed to write. I need to write this shit down.
Real estate or incels, whichever one.
Oh, okay. Basically, I'll put it this way: do people have rights to be dickheads? Right? Do people have the right to be exclusionary? I have fumbled over this my entire life because I largely look as myself as an outsider to people in general. I feel like I'm the black sheep. I feel like I don't fit into most like crews, organizations, whatever. And because of that, like it's really hard for me to be like, yeah, y'all should just be at free range to wall out people as you choose, because like it sucks. It really fucking sucks. But on the other hand, there is absolutely levels of kinship that people have. And you have it with your own friends, right? People you've been with for, 10, 20, 30 years. You got those ride or die friendships, that kind of shit, right? How do you negate that? How do you tell people that you should value X person that you never met before over people that you know, trust, and love? And there's like my ethical calculator literally starts spitting out error codes on this conversation. So I'll simply say this. I think that when it comes to like market access in general, like if you just like making money, being a bigot doesn't make any damn sense. If you believe in like a doctrine of fairness and that you should give to get, you shouldn't really be that exclusionary because everyone has something to give and to get.
But we can recognize that people have different priorities, right? So like,
right. The issue that I have is that I recognize that not everyone shares my moral code, that some people, because of their own like weird ass purity doctrines, value certain groups of people far more than they value other groups. I get it to some degree because I do it too. But what really it gets down to is there a point where you should not guarantee a minimum level of acceptance? That one, I think we kind of have to just say, yes, we need to guarantee that. Otherwise, you are literally just dehumanizing people. You're not treating them with any form of dignity or respect or value. And like, I'm sorry, but like, I don't care how racist you are. Like, that person goes through 90% of the same fucking shit that you do every single day. They're trying to take care of themselves. They're trying to take care of the people they care about, the people they love. Like, I can't float that shit. I just can't.
Um. Um. Okay, so I'll move off. Oh, and I just quickly to address your incel thing, right? Like, yeah, but the right to bodily autonomy is, is above a person's right to um uh yeah, have sex with them. So like, and that's fundamentally different to private property in my estimation. But I guess you might disagree because private property comes from like your effort, and yeah, I know.
Right, comes
Yeah,
from your body. Like in the
from your
classic
body.
example, this is the cake case, right? So like, so you're saying that like you don't have a right to like make somebody like grab you and jerk you off, right? But you do have a right to make somebody bake you a cake, right? To
They don't have a
literally
right,
like
but they're
for
welcome too, is what I'm saying. Sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
sure, sure. But like do you think that like I should be able to walk into like a shop, right, and compel someone to use their body and make me a cake?
We've already talked
All
about. I
right,
think
fair
I've
enough.
more or less agreed with you there. But uh, yeah. So we'll just have to agree on this part. But you said other things. And I want to yell about you on those things too. You talked about how the federal government has uh I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. I'm not being very elegant today, so I do apologize. But it has like the power of violence, right? State violence. Um, and we should be afraid of the federal government because of that power. But um, and maybe you would already agree with this point, but like it seems like that while yes, the federal government, because of its supremacy role, has more state the power to employ more state violence than um, the state governments. Even if we were to rebalance the situation, that wherever there be power, right, state power, they'll have state violence that could be incredibly repressive, and that might just take different forms, but still be like uh incredibly dangerous. So like in terms of like an actual state, a U.S. state, or a locality with its like local sheriff's department, they have their ability to employ that violence, and it doesn't particularly matter to so what I'm trying to get to is that it doesn't particularly matter to me that the FBI has like access to so many more resources and can theoretically violate my rights in this way and that way. I'm not like particularly I'm I guess as equally as afraid of the FBI as I am of state troopers and the local cops, right? In fact, maybe more afraid of local cops because I'm more likely to interface with them than the FBI, right? So um when you talk about this skepticism of the government, of the federal government and their state violence, I don't find it like particularly compelling just because they have bigger budgets. I hope what I said made some sort of
No,
sense.
I think you're right to be scared of people. Yeah, look, you should fear states too, right? You should fear any of these organizations that have tremendous amounts of power, which states absolutely do, right? All I'm saying is that like the level of difference in power, the feds have a lot more. And although they're not going to be in contact with you specifically as much because of the role that they play, um, as a standalone entity, they are much more dangerous than like any given state government, like to more people than just yourself, right? So when we're talking about like a good way of thinking about this is like on an individual level, like my local fucking traffic warden scares me more than the president, right? Because
Mm.
the traffic warden could give me a ticket. The president, I don't really control, right? I don't. There's no way I can dodge them, right? They exist out there. The traffic warden, though, they're gonna fucking give me like if I park wrong, they're gonna give me a fucking ticket. That sucks. But obviously, there's a huge difference in power between these two individuals. And there's a huge difference in terms of how much damage they can do if we get the wrong people in that role, right? You get the wrong person in the role of we get the wrong people in the government, which I think to some extent we already have. But if you get the wrong people in the government,
We got communists there, right? That's the problem.
dude, fucking yeah, dude, they're everywhere. Anyway, oh, what the fuck's his name? He was
Sorry,
right the
you
whole
get the wrong
time.
people in the government.
It leads to very bad outcomes, and the more power that they have to do bad things, the scarier they are to a larger group of people. And so like the big issue I have with the feds is really just their size and their power. Like if you gave any particular state the same power and size of the federal government, I would fear them just as much. That doesn't mean I fear them in the sense of like as it relates to me personally, right? I fear the state police as well. But I'm talking about fear in the sense of who is more likely to fuck up the whole country, who is more likely to denigrate my freedoms in the long term. It's obviously going to be the federal government, right? Like they have the ultimate power. If the state does something the feds don't like, the feds will stop them. If the feds do something that I don't like, I mean, there's no one to stop them, right? They have they are
themselves.
God. Yeah, but themselves, right?
Right.
The Supreme Court, kinda, right?
Yeah,
But
well, that's one of the reasons why, like, I we can talk mad shit about the framers if we want to, but the reality is like the separation of powers, particularly having a primary or a tertiary system, it makes sense. And hell, it's almost a quaternary system because you have both the Senate and the House. Like having literally like the vested interest, or at least to some degree, like the separation of, hey, you can't fucking touch this shit, does matter. The only thing that I really think we need to have the serious conversation on when it comes to that balance of power, straight up is, why is it that we keep just shoving so much power into the goddamn presidency when we are shoving everything from or that's going to the presidency is acts of Congress? If anything, it screams to me that we don't need to empower the presidency, we need to empower the speaker. And like, I've thrown out a couple ideas regarding this, but like maybe the speaker needs to be a nationally elected position. Maybe we actually need to make it where the speaker is both the head of government within not only within the House, but also within the Senate too. Like, we're going to shift the power balance behind having at least a more unitary voice within that body to make it more run in that system instead of having the president, which they keep doing this, and they're supposed to happen. They're the one who sets the legislative agenda. Like, they're literally running on platforms which they write no fucking laws for and have no jurisdiction over except to enforce granted by powers within Congress. Holy shit. Like, guys, like, am I not the only one having a stroke here? Like, in that, like, the presidency keeps getting asked to do more and more and more, which is not supposed to be their prerogative at all?
I think a big part of that is, I think you're 100% right, and I agree with everything you just said down to a T. I think a big part of the reason for that's happening is because it's much easier to connect a criticism to a face as opposed to like a group of people, right? Diffusion of responsibility. Every congressperson can say, well, I would have, this would have happened, but then, I was blocked, or I said this, and, this is complicated. You should watch my, 18-hour long hearing on fucking NP. Like, you can listen to it on NPR, right? For sure, right? Or you can, look at a president's speech, look at their debate. They're going to promise you the world. And if shit goes bad, you're going to blame them, regardless of how much they had to do with it. And if shit goes good, you're going to give them credit, even if they had nothing to do with it. Newsflash, most of the time they have nothing to do with it. And when
you're
you
right.
have this, when you have this level of like, the people just searching for a scapegoat when shit goes wrong. I mean, if like
It's not even pointed at the right people for me. Like 90% of what people bitch about, they're like, oh, thanks Obama or thanks Trump or thanks Biden. And while there's certain things that we can talk about, like, border control enforcement, like the kids in cages shit.
agencies,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Like there's a lot of there's shit where it's like 90% of what people bitch about.
Increase civic education. But my problem with what you said previously is is like electing the Speaker of the House, right? Like
it's kind of a good idea.
I don't know if I don't know if I want that to make that even more politicized than it is, right? Like I don't know.
It would be a better compromise than getting rid of the Electoral College, in my opinion.
What?
Because the presidency would serve as like the senior leader of basically the senatorial class, where the speaker would lead largely the House. They are going to be the advocates for more likely popular reform because they're elected every 2 years.
No, I don't like this. I'd have to put more thought into framing of my because my response.
It's because it's a Siberius idea, and you're like, I don't want to admit that it's right, but you might have a point.
Awful. No, because I don't want to politicize it more than it is. Like I think that would be terrible. Like I think it's fine as it is being the majority of the House. You guys get to elect whoever is the leader there. Like that works for me. To have that split, that it seems like it would create even more dysfunction.
What if you had 10 speakers of the House and they randomly like rotated to decide each thing put in?
I hate you. Thanks. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And beyond that, like you were talking about the growing power of the presidency. I guess I agree with you to a large extent there. But I just I agree with what Lactoid said in response to that. And how it's just easier to blame certain individuals. But like if people are mistaken, for who is at fault for the government, that seems like we should have more civil education, which means in Lactoid speak, we should steal more money to invest in civil education. You would agree?
Hold on. No, I'm happy you're using the right language. If you just advocated for that, I would have no big issue with you. And like, we should all just you want to steal more money to do the thing that you want. It's
okay. I want to fight this. Now, granted, I'm a bit autist when it comes to like how people relate to other people. So if you all think I'm just completely deranged, then fine. But what I get here is that we look at the president, we're like, I voted for you. My life is not getting better. Like, fuck you. But the reality here is that, in my opinion, 90% of what's actually going to affect your life is not done by the presidency. It's done by Congress. And as much as people could and should hold a lot more fire to the reality of their congressional representatives and their senators, like it's not like that big face. I think Congress needs the big face that is like front and center, that everyone does vote for, to say, hey, look, you're the guy who literally writes the fucking laws, and those laws are screwing me, versus the guy over here that has to wait for them to be enforced. I think there's a critical difference there.
No, but this is still a problem. Even if you elect the Speaker of the House, right? People are going to put the blame on the Speaker of the House when it might not be their fault. Hold on. Well,
okay, fair enough.
Their fault. Yeah, right?
Okay, like I can roll with that, but I think it's far more prevalent that the speaker is going to get blamed for stuff, but also it's far more likely to be their fault than it is the presidency.
Is it?
Nuance, maybe. I would think so.
Why would it be more likely to be their fault? What is the current political blockages that exist? Like, is the Senate still in its configuration? If so, well, then the Senate might be the thing that's blocking everything. And then you present to people this person, this political appointee, the Speaker of the House, and they have just a general idea that they're in charge of Congress. Well, it must be your fault that legislation isn't going through. No, I'm sorry, that's like another department, and I don't have like you're just replicating the issue. I don't see what
Okay, so like I can get where your criticism there is like, hey, we elect as a nation a Democratic Speaker of the House, or let's go one further. It's Speaker of Congress. They have a vote in the Senate and they have a vote in the House, right? Just something like that. They take the fall for everything. The problem is they were working with a Democratic House, but the Senate was still Republican. And they just take shit after shit after shit. I will agree with you that they are still likely to take hits for things that were beyond their control. The other side of that, though, at least for me, is that one, it does provide a more clear separation of powers between, hey, this guy is in charge of actually writing the shit. And also, at least you're pointing it in the direction of the people who deserve the criticism.
Separation of powers. We already have a clear separation of powers.
And it's not that we don't have a clear separation of powers. It's that we keep vesting the separation of powers towards one direction. Like that. That's where me and like
if the Speaker of the House decided to not do their jobs and like put this on someone else, right? Or in some way empower the presidency, what difference would it make if they're elected or not elected?
I suppose there's levels to where you can possibly do that. The problem, at least for me, is that when you are that big cheese kind of conversation where the buck really does kind of stop here, you don't really get to say, I didn't do anything. Like, that's the one thing the American people won't accept, is that you did nothing or it was beyond my control. We actually over criticize on that degree. So if anything, I will. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
If anything, like if I'm gonna like sub to where you're going here and defend it, I would say that there is legitimate room to say, hey, we are going to make that person a target more than they should be. But I'm just simply advocating that is the direction I would like the target to be far more than the presidency. And I know that's splitting hairs, but like that's where I really do believe that. Like we need to move that target.
We essentially do elect the Speaker of the House. We do elect the Senate Majority Leader. It's just that it's in their locales rather than the entire country, and they do go back to their constituency and say, "Oh, there's nothing that I could have done." Right? We have the feckless Joe Schumer and the feckless Nancy Pelosi, and they'll say when it comes to progressive priorities that are desired by the majority of the country, they'll say there was nothing I could do. I'm sorry. Right, and then we get sent back to the House anyway, or the Senate. So I don't understand. And then Joe Biden, when it feels like breaking his campaign promise, he'll say, "Well, the Senate parliamentarian demanded that I strip this thing that you all desired out of it," and all of a sudden, I give a shit about that.
Right.
And they'll say there's nothing I can do. That's literally the Democratic Party playbook, is that there's nothing I could do. The Republicans are meanies, and there's nothing I could do. So, like, I don't know. I don't know how this solves anything.
Like, so the problem is, at least for me, and I'll put it this way, the only thing I can actually add here is that there's a lot of that where, like, the president's saying, hey, my campaign promise wasn't honored because, fucking Joe Manchin over here won't go along with my stuff. The problem is that he should have never been involved in the conversation anyway. Like, this is not the purview of the president. That's my issue. Now, we've already iterated this over and over again, and I think we've made our points. We just don't agree. So, like, triumvirate here, lactoid. Who do you think's completely batshit here?
Okay, the only issue I have, and maybe this is just me having a total brain fart, so please bear with me. What if the people elect a Speaker of the House that is of the other party than the majority of the House? Doesn't this lead to a pretty serious problem?
In potentiality, yes. Like, and this is actually where I'll side with the Democrats on. That shouldn't happen, and if it is, that means your system's rigged.
What? Why would that?
Because
I don't think it does happen, right?
It could happen. Like that's the problem. Like that, like gerrymandering can make it to where that happens, right?
No. I mean, like, leaving aside gerrymandering. Like, my understanding currently is what happens is that whatever party like controls the House, it's to like appoint the Speaker of the House, right?
Right.
So because then it makes sense to have the person like writing the shit if they're gonna like get it passed through the
it's
party.
More the majority, but that ends up being the case, right? So the majority, like Democrats or Republicans could tag team to like elect anyone, right? But it turns out like whoever's in charge has a majority,
Right.
votes in a block. But yeah,
right. And so, well, like, what happens if, like, let's say, it just so happens that Republicans win, like, because of evil gerrymandering and electoral college, blah blah blah. They win like
Right.
85% of the House, and then like the Dems win the Speaker election. I mean, you've got a serious problem, right? The person writing the
Right.
bills will never get enough votes to get any of them passed.
Look, okay, so that's
This
where
is the only
like,
issue I have.
yeah, like I get that, and it is a potentiality. The problem that I have here is that if you are the party that is electing at least 53% of the seats in that particular body, you should have the speakership. Because, well, number one, you are subjecting it to a national popular vote. So if your side got the most votes, how do you not have the speaker?
Oh, is that the electoral college? Are we not putting that in the electoral college now? Are we separating it from the electoral college?
This number one is that I would not put the speaker under the electoral college. I think that's the compromise that could be made, is that the presidency remains under the electoral college, but the speaker is a national popular vote.
So the only popular vote is the Speaker of the House?
Well, the issue with this again is like, what if? So, like, pragmatically speaking, okay, leaving aside any principles here for a second.
Sure.
You have the House of Representatives. Like, how does anything get done? Because if I am Speaker of the House and most of the House disagrees with me, so that, like, every vote is going to lose what I want, and I'm going to stop anything that they. I'm just going to table anything on the agenda that I disagree with, which is going to be everything.
Right. So, like, okay, I will entertain the hypothetical in the regards that, like, I'm literally trying to outline this shouldn't happen literally 95% of the time.
You're wrong about
like
that.
Worst case scenario. Okay, like if I'm wrong, fine. Like I know gerrymandering is a pain in the ass, but
I'll lay out quickly and then please respond. Like,
sure, go ahead.
Here's the thing: you're basically creating like rather than like the presidency and the vice presidency running as a dual ticket, you're creating a triple ticket. Because this is exactly how this is going to go. Like in terms of like how they're going to campaign. You want either an effective or you just want an effective speaker, right? Like when you're going to vote for that, you want a speaker that could do something. And so you're going to basically have a triple ticket here. And like if it says the popular vote, and even with the electoral college, generally speaking, the popular vote is the electoral vote, right? The electoral winner. Then you are going to have like the Democrat win when there's a Democratic momentum within the country, and vice versa, and that can easily clash with the population of the House. And so you're going to have these conflicts all the time because they're completely separate from, like, you're saying that, like, it shouldn't happen because you have a Democratic majority or Republican majority in the House, and so the speaker should matter. But why should that be the case? Those are local races. Like, those local races... yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's simply a math equation for me, right? We do know that the House can be off by a couple points compared to, like, the popular vote. The Senate can be significantly worse, actually, right? What we consistently should see, and this is where, like, again, I actually agree with the Democrats here in the talking point of why is it that we see, the swing in the House of 5 points in some aspects, right? To where, like, the Democrats get 52% of the vote, but the Republicans were able to actually pull out, what is it, like 51% of the seats. That can happen. It's actually far more rare than people want to let in that it happens. It's more like 3 points is the average norm. So it's possible in a very close, contentious race that you can have a majority, like, Republican House and then a Democratic speaker. That's possible. And in that case, you either have to basically force a coalition government or that government's just fucking out for 2 years. I will accept that. Because for me, the entire point is that we're not putting the burden upon the presidency to, like, narrate a legislative agenda, which they have no real control over, but we're actually putting it towards the people who actually craft the fucking damn thing. That's my hit. Like, I know we're not on board with like the same thing, but I think there's both a moral argument to have here where we're actually putting the finger towards the people who are supposed to be doing that job, but also there's a practical sense that, most of the European countries have their like head of government not from their executive branch, but from their legislative branch. And I think that actually makes some sense.
Okay.
Well, I want to one quick thing. You could absolutely have it this way, and one of the things that you would see if you elected the Speaker of the House is you've essentially created a second president, right? But not in terms of like agencies or whatever, or ability to wage war, or any of this shit. What you've done is you've essentially just like created a new position that has veto power, which for me, who prefers the government doing as little as possible, am fully on board with this idea. The only issue I have is I wouldn't leave it to the popular vote. I would also have it be up to the Electoral College. That's my only change.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna leave this alone. But I want to ask one more thing before maybe we move on to abortion. This is not actually. This is more of a statement from me. I think we can plan our economy. I knew I was gonna.
You're going into dark territory, Prime.
I knew I was gonna back to it. Look, I think this is like really simple. Like planning your economy doesn't have to be like the federal government saying these factories must be used for this. It's simply saying that we can foresee a need within our future needs within our economy. Right now, it's green power. We can see a future need for that, and so we are going to pass policy to help this industry grow, and to get it a faster start than it would otherwise. Or, well, I'll leave it there, I guess. Like, yeah, I think that it's perfectly fine. That's economic planning, and I think that's good economic planning when you are simply encouraging these industries to grow that will have future benefits to your economy. Simple.
I mean, under that description, I mean, yeah, a lot of people would agree with you. Subsidies and taxes are a way that the government plans the economy, right? Like the government decides, we want more wheat. So what are we going to do? We're going to subsidize wheat. So every time you grow a bundle of wheat, or corn, I guess is a better example, because we grow so much fucking corn in this country. Too much corn in this country.
Yeah.
And what we decide is we want to have heart disease and obesity, and we want high fructose corn syrup, and we really, really want to poison our children, right? This is the pathological desire that our government has. And so in order to do this, what they do is they figure out, okay, how do we accomplish this goal? We will pay corn farmers money for their corn that we stole, right? We stole the money. And then we give that to corn farmers to make it even more profitable to grow corn, even when the market for corn isn't really there, right? And so we create a whole fuck ton of corn because they want to kill us. And so this is an example of the government planning the economy, right? Solar, you talked about green energy. That's maybe one where perhaps their motivations are a little bit less psychopathic, right? They're actually interested in presumably saving the planet. And so they're like, okay, we got to get off fossil fuels. So let's, of course, they still give subsidies to fossil fuels. So,
Look, no, I mean, if we're talking about growing corn, right, blame Tiberius's oppressed electoral college, right? Like that's the
collateral damage. Okay.
Yeah, but
it's better than letting you fucking Dems own the fucking presidency every time.
Oh no. Oh my god. Okay, we might have to fight on the electoral college.
I actually will flip sides on this argument. Like, okay, there's a reality to where, like, I get where the electoral college is, why it's there, but I sincerely do not believe that you deserve the mandate of government if you can't actually get, more votes than the other guy. Like, there's just something fucking wrong about that to me.
The problem is that, like, corn growers are farmers, because we call them farmers. are in politically sensitive states, and they have amassed political power, and so because of that, they get presidents bend the knee towards them and have distorted the priorities of the country in their direction. Yeah, when the market doesn't, when no one wants corn the way that
I
our tax or our budget would
I want
would
to push
imply.
back a little bit on this. I don't think that like the agriculture sector is just this big leviathan behemoth that is like politically super powerful. As much as it's a political institution that does have like economic and political power, but it doesn't really have a natural enemy. Like literally the biggest people who kind of hate farmers is the environmentalists, and they have way bigger fish to fry, particularly when it comes to like the oil sector, right? Or the energy sector. Like for me, it's just farmers are so low on everybody's radar that by the time anyone wants to do about it, like we've already went home for the evening. Like we have shit to do. I do think that needs to change a little bit because like Phil is like wants to kill me for saying that like food is too expensive or like food. I think food is actually too cheap, but there is a reality to where it's like there are signs to me where it's either our food is either too cheap because we waste 40% of it and we're all fat as shit, or it's that our food is reasonably priced, but our food is terrible and we need to change the substance or the quality of the food. So either one of those I can take, but like there's something fucked up about our food, right?
Yeah, it's a mix of both, by the way.
Yeah. So okay.
Our portion sizes are massive, right? I mean,
True.
America, compared to other countries, right? We eat.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I like
and
eating
it's
too.
Great.
I
No,
do. I
fuck
love
that.
it. I love it for sure, and I understand, and that's why when you said the farmers have no natural enemy.
I think it's really a good. I love his framing there.
Yeah, well, I think that they don't. I suppose, but I think that's part of the problem because they have no natural enemy.
There's no one to keep them in check.
There's no one to keep them in check, right? It would almost be like the tobacco companies before before the government started getting involved, like the FDA, like started getting pissed off and all this shit, right? All these Medicare lawsuits and Medicaid
Start
lawsuits
taking
that
action
started
with their
coming out of this.
stolen money. Yeah.
To some extent, yeah, and there's arguments in favor of some of the things that they did because the tobacco industry did lie. And they definitely had regulatory capture, and they definitely had control over a lot of the American media, and they had no natural enemies for a long time. And what do we get? Almost half the country smoking and lung cancer rates beyond belief. And what do we have now? Heart disease being the number one killer. What is it? A third of all Americans are obese. Something like that.
It's even worse than that. Like what is it? It's literally 70% of Americans are overweight.
Jesus Christ.
It's so bad. Like literally, okay. Like if there is anything NatSec has been screaming for 10 years, they want to bring back. They're actually talking about bringing back the draft, not because they want all these people in uniform. It's because they want Americans to stop being such fat asses that if we actually need to recruit anybody, we have someone to recruit.
I've heard that it's becoming a major security concern.
It is.
Right, you got like 30% of the population that you can really draw from because the rest of them are overweight.
That's
obese.
a stupid. That's a stupid policy response. And
the Chinese mind they, dude.
The Chinese, yeah, sure. It's a stupid policy response.
It's not a good policy response, but it's from their wheelhouse. Like that's
of course, because there's all the conceit. Like, oh, why don't we just make them all soldiers? Like, it's fucking ridiculous. All right.
It's a very government way to respond to something.
Well, it's not just a government way. It's like, hey, the DOD. Well, yeah, it's like, hey, the DOD is like looking here and they're like, hey, we have a problem. Our recruitment's fucking in the tank.
We don't have to talk about their dumbass solution. If that, okay, I'm not even going to address.
It's not my solution, by the way. It's just something I
also don't support it.
Yeah. Sure. Fair enough. Abortion.
Let's do it
while we're here. Okay. I'm for it. More of it. the more the merrier. Maybe compel them, right? Like, have you considered abortion? But I really want my baby.
China's coming here quicker than I thought. Jesus Christ.
But seriously, I am pro-choice. I want people to have the choice to decide. I don't know, whatever. You understand the concept of pro-choice. The American version of that. Lactoid, your position. Oh, before that, let's go to Ty.
Oh, okay. I am not an absolutist when it comes to abortion. I'll just put out two things. Number one is that when it comes to like literally the battle of the sexes, I think as a man, you should be at least some modicum of pro-life. As a woman, you should probably be some modicum of pro-choice, because the problem is when it comes to this conversation, it's pretty blatant. Any rule, law, like doctrine that limits abortion for a woman means that your not only vitality but mortality is at risk, because like there could be a law that completely makes your life a living hell or may kill you. We don't want that. On the other side of that, if men just concede that fight, to me, it's just giving women carte blanche to eliminate your kids at will. And I do believe that whether you call it a clump of cells or whatever the hell else that you want to call it, that is still like a human something. Like, it's not a developed human, but it's still a human, and it has some kind of value. And like, that's hard for me to just be like, yeah, have an abortion. That's completely okay. I can't float that either. So like, there's definitely a massive gray area for me in this conversation. But honestly, this is where like morals go to die. You can't be an absolutist on this without being completely unreasonable, in my opinion.
Gotcha. All right. No, Lactoid, please.
This is probably this is the ethical issue that I think is one of the most difficult questions for our country or for the world. And I think it's one of the toughest moral philosophy questions that you can really grapple with. And it's very frustrating because you have people on both sides who are sort of ignoring that fact, right? Where instead of actually grappling with that, I think, very tough moral question, instead what they'll do is just shout slogans, right? They'll shout slogans like, abortion is murder on one side, or the other side, my body, my choice. And they won't really actually like think about it at all. And this is evident when you see any of those YouTube videos of like, people who have some understanding of like the moral qualms in their brain. Like they've done like, maybe they've read one book, or they've like watched like 2 10-minute videos of their favorite YouTuber, and they have some idea. And you would expect that, like, it's not very like a very fleshed out opinion. And then they go to these protests where people are like out marching and shit, and people don't know shit. They'll be like, yeah, I very strongly believe this. This is my very like earnestly held position. And then like the person making the video will ask like one question, like very like simple question, like one or two questions, and then like everything just shuts down. It's very disappointing that people think this way. But some might say it's just natural of being human. But I think this subject in particular is especially the case, because I think this subject in particular has a gross factor that people just don't want to focus on. I don't think people like the idea of thinking about abortion, whether they're pro-choice or pro-life. And I think a lot of people who are pro-choice, like if they really sat down and like saw an abortion, or they thought about it, they would probably like personally find something disgusting about that they would have to grapple with. And then in the same time, right, like you could show, I guess, instances in that, like, of people who have had their lives, substantially upended. Or you could look at like certain stats you can point to that would show that having accessible abortion leads to some positive outcomes, and depending on what you're measuring. For me, the question is going to be entirely like I think the question's a moral one, right? If it's murder, it doesn't matter if it's good overall for society in terms of like GDP growth, or et cetera. If you're killing a human being, you're violating their consent, which is a major infraction. And so the only question that matters to me is, are you killing a human being? You're killing a human. All right. So that's already a point against. Oh, fuck. But what does that mean, right? Like if I chop off your arm and your cells die in your arm, did I kill a human? Well, I killed human cells, but I didn't really kill a human. So what is a fucking human, right? What is a person, I guess, is a better way of phrasing that, right? And so that's, I think, the key question. That's what I'm willing to discuss with people. Once it is determined to be a person, which I think does happen in the womb, no abortion at all whatsoever. If it is not a person, then abortion's on the table. I think that's how it has to go. And where that line is very difficult.
Okay. So I'll draw a line here. And we've had this conversation before, but I think that the from the moment I don't know whether conception would be fair or like attaching to a uterine wall or I remember someone came on this stream a long time ago and like it gave like a whole rundown of like the process of like of of the embryo, or it's not, I don't think it's even called an embryo at that point, but like the cells attaching to like the uterine wall and like that whole step and how like there's like failures along each spot, right? So we're gonna take like our very basic understanding. We're gonna work with that, right? So I'm sure someone who is more medically inclined could do a better job of some delineation here. But let's say, I don't know, it successfully attaches to a uterine wall, and let's pretend like after that's 100% successful. At that point, I think, yeah, it's a human. I don't buy the left line that it's not. It's just a clump of cells. Like, that's plainly ridiculous. It's going to turn into a human, right? Like, let it bake. it's going to be a baby. So I'm like plainly willing to accept that. What I'm not willing to accept is that it necessarily has rights that are equal to the woman that is carrying that child. So I would, that woman, because bodily autonomy, just like that incel can't have sex with her, as we've established, like to it, right? That baby can't use her body to grow if she doesn't want it. And of course, as to make it clear, I believe in abortion up to the day, up to the baby crowning. So you can't get any more left than that. I assure you, I'm very proud of that. I've taken that.
He was doing. Oh crap! He was doing so well though. Damn it! Like 60% of that or 70% of that, I'm like, that's pretty reasonable. That's actually like well thought out and like good. And it's like up until the baby crowning. God, Prime, why do you do this to me?
Here's the thing, but like I had issue with what you had said previously. Ties like, mothers can kill your baby at will. Which I mean, I guess sure, essentially true. But like the construction of this is that mothers like are irresponsible, women are irresponsible, and that they just like kill babies like willy-nilly. Like this is like not like a thing that they put thought into and they consider their economic position, or that they even consider their partners, right? Like that's not a thing that happens. Of course they do, right?
Right.
If their partner is a rapist, the terms of who raped the baby, then they consider it. If it's a loving husband who has the economic security to help take care of them, yeah, that's a big consideration as to whether they keep the child. All these things like women are capable of doing, which we as a society kind of pretend that they don't. But I think that like
I'm sorry. I want to kind of give you the point here, because like I don't like abortion, but there was a level to where like I looked at the conversation before Roe got repealed, and I'm like, I'm fine at first days, because the reality is that we had less abortions literally every single year since Roe was instituted, and we can talk about like how much of that was legal versus how much of that was like an intent, but the reality here is like women were doing or like behaving in a more moral and ethical manner literally year upon year upon year, even when we had more women to have babies. Like there's levels to where like I actually could float, hey, we were getting better with this, not worse. Like women were being responsible with this right that they were given.
A couple things. I know.
Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I want to amend my statement before when I said that once is life, you can't abort. That's only if you had consensual sex. I think if you have consensual sex, then you consent to, putting the baby in that position, very similar to like if I put a baby on my boat, let's say, and then I went out into the middle of the ocean, I can't just be like, oh, my property, get off, and throw the baby off into the water. Obviously, that's not acceptable, right? If I put somebody in a position where I have to see them out of it, then you should be legally required to see them out of it. Same thing in like I'm like driving down 80 miles per hour on the highway. My car trespassing. They can't do that. Unacceptable. The abortion stat. A lot of people will point to the fact that when you look at abortion rates between countries that have abortion outlawed compared to abortions or states that have abortion legalized, they'll point that there's somewhat similar rates, and that's true. The problem with that, though, is that this has to do with birth control accessibility, where the more birth control accessible a place is, the less abortions you have. There's a direct correlation. And so when you control for that, outlawing abortion leads to less abortion, which is obvious. This is obvious, right? Like there's several studies on this. So if you criminalize abortion, you have a lot fewer abortions. But if in tandem with that, you also get rid of birth control or make it less accessible, then you get more abortions. And so it kind of evens out. So if you want to minimize the amount of abortions, what you should be doing is like basically handing out birth control for free at gas stations, and then also criminalizing abortion, and then you would get the lowest rates possible if that was your goal.
Right. The problem is that like I there's a point where it just goes too far for me, and like I hate to say that because like I there's something intrinsically disgusting about it.
Too much agency. I get it. Right.
Right.
Have too much agency. Go ahead.
Well, there's a level of personal agency that like I feel like needs to be at least respected to some degree. There's also the level where like I like it's the right winger in me wanting to fight the other side of the right winger in me. I don't trust the government enough to give a law that has enough flexibility to be like effective on this issue. And because of that, it's like, hey, I want to be a small government guy because I don't trust the government to actually police abortion worth of shit. It's weird. I know that doesn't like maybe make some coherent sense, but I really do feel that way.
And I we don't have to focus on this point. My extreme / sensible position of baby crowning equal dead. But
can I ask you a question? Would you be comfortable? Honestly, okay, please answer honestly.
He's gonna give me a crazy hypothetical. Go ahead.
I am. So right when the baby is crowning, okay, would you be comfortable? Let's say a pregnant woman who's like got like some weird like mental shit. She puts like a cheese grater like up inside herself, and then like pushes the baby through like, and it comes out like in like a mess. Would you really like look at that and be like, yeah, who cares? It's all good. Or would you be like, something fucked up just happened. Something very fucked up just happened, and we like probably shouldn't have allowed that to occur. Where do you honestly feel, Prime, on that
question? First of all, like I'm amazed at her at the strength of her vagina, her vaginal strength, right? Because imagine, like, it's hard enough to push a baby out, but now, right, according to our friend Lactoid, she's pushing.
She sees it as a challenge. It's like a new CrossFit routine.
She squeezes and she like slices a bit, so like, it comes out in chunks.
Yeah,
it does that purely vaginal muscles.
I would be uncomfortable if this happened personally, legally.
I would say I'd be uncomfortable, but I would see the thing that I would be most lament is not meeting her before I knew she was crazy, because like that pussy is amazing. That's like top. That's like whatever what she's doing there. I want a part of that. Right now, after she does the baby grading thing, it's not gonna be a turn on. But before then, oh my god. Just like come instantly. Right. But to answer your question, I would be uncomfortable with such a situation. I think maybe the method that people utilize to kill, right? Like that matters. Like I'm like pro, like pro suicide. That's not, I shouldn't call that. But like I'm okay with people like taking their own lives. But the manner of which we do that matters, right? So like if it's like limited to the medically assisted suicide, and we give them a way to end their lives in a peaceful manner, that matters rather than like, oh, okay, you want to die, and the doc takes out a gun and blows her head. Like I think that those things matter. So like a baby coming out through a cheese grater or whatever, like that implies some level of, I don't know, psychosis that's happening. So that might be an issue there. So like abortions through some sort of safe medical environment, yeah. But anyway, I just quickly on that issue, I think what annoys me is that when I say like, a baby can up to the last day, is that people kind of assume that there would be an even distribution of abortions. That like at any point in time, a woman just decides like, I don't want to have a baby, and then they end the pregnancy, and so you'd have like an epidemic of women just like who have carried this baby for like 8 months and 30 days, right? Or 29 days. And at the last second, they're like, you know what, never mind. Kill the baby. That's like not how that works. Like if they are having an abortion in the third trimester, it's because something catastrophic has happened. Absolutely catastrophic. And when we put up barriers to women to get these abortions, that means there are people who don't get those services. So I want to like give them maximum freedom, maximum agency, right? I'm the true libertarian here, so that they can exercise the agency when they need to, and that's the point where they really need to. And they're like things, they're like diseases and stuff that only are become self-evident during that time, like during the third trimester. So there's all kinds of ways things can go wrong. So I want to give them that space to be able to do so. And then I guess beyond that, yeah. So in terms of person, I never got to finish my point there. You're a human, but that doesn't make you, or at least in terms under the law, I don't think it should mean that you have personhood. That that it should be respected in the same way. But I admit that there are a lot of great ethical areas. Like the classic example is, drunk driver hits a pregnant woman, kills her and her child. They charge her double murder? I think that's a really interesting ethical gray zone. Um, yeah, so I'll admit that. Go ahead, Ty.
Yeah, so there's definitely a level to where like what you said is very true in the regards that like if we were to institute, like last day abortions, like we're not going to see like a precipitous jump in abortions. I absolutely agree that that is a reality. What I do like the right winger in me is just screaming at this, and the reason why is that like it is like an ethical like condonement that we would actually find that appropriate because you're absolutely correct. Like no one's having a abortion in the third trimester unless there's something horrible going on. And that like literally if that person is doing it then like whatever world that baby's about to come into might not be one worth that baby coming into. Like I actually can very much go along that line. We can talk about foster shit and all that at some point later, Lactoid. What it really comes down to, at least for me, is that one, no one has a third term abortion without at least some level of goddamn sense. The other side of it, though, is just like the moral condonement of that is just so fucking revolting to me. Like, forget what the numbers are. Like, just the insinuation that we would say, yeah, that's okay, makes me want to fucking vomit.
Enough, Lactoid.
There's definitely a gut response that should be like contended with. Obviously not like morally, but just like recognized, I guess. Because yeah, it definitely makes me feel uncomfortable. So first, the argument that, or I guess the thought that the world the baby's going to come into, it could be sufficiently bad to justify killing the baby if you consider it to be murder. I think that has a lot of issues in of itself, like as a standalone argument, right? Because the foster, I think you already called it beforehand, Ty, right? Like that justifies, replacing foster homes with, mass murdering facilities. If because arguably they would have bad lives later on. But what it sounds like, Prime, is that for you, personhood is actually relatively not as important because even if it is a person, the bodily autonomy of the woman is sufficiently important enough to justify killing. If it's a person, killing the person anyway, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a hypothetical. Let's say you had a
More
woman.
cheese graters.
No more cheese graters. No more cheese graters. You know those rope bridges like in Indiana Jones or whatever, like with
Yeah.
like wood planks or whatever? Let's say you had a woman like pick up a baby, like let's say 6 months old. All right, walk out in the middle of the rope bridge, and she's standing there. And she's like, "Okay, I don't consent to this baby touching my body anymore." But she's holding the baby; it's on her body. Would you be okay with her just dropping the baby and it fall down into the ravine and like die?
Before I try to tackle this, I gotta like appreciate my friend Lactoid because like if no one comes up with hypotheticals like this guy, all right? Like I think I come up with some like pretty crazy ones, but like literally he's the king. He's the king on these things. Like so I'm just gonna like
I've been through the LSAT. Okay, the shit on that is even weirder. I'll tell you.
Okay, all right.
Well, no, it's not. It's actually not weirder than that. That's
But all right. So I'll try to deal with this. I think this is an interesting question. Oh boy. Is it a ravine filled with cheese graters?
sure. Why not? The ravine filled with cheese graters and alligators. All the graters. And you're standing up there on the rope bridge, and or the woman is, and she's holding like the 6-month-old.
Yeah.
And it's a great strain on her arms because she hasn't done her weightlifting that week. It's really weighing her down, and she's like, you know what? Drops the baby down the ravine. Should she be forced to carry that baby across the rope bridge, or can she just drop it?
I think she is. No, I don't think she can just drop it. I think at that point that baby is a person, and a dependent person, and she is responsible for that person. And if she were
so person is what matters.
Yeah, and you that happens after birth.
Okay, why?
Why not?
What about the birth? Does the birth canal, like, in the absence of a cheese grater, does the birth canal like imbue the outgoing baby with personhood? Is that how that works?
But we do this all the time in terms of spaces, right? Like different spaces have different legal statuses, right? Like in terms of like our borders, our immigration borders. Like when you're like it's like the plane. Like a plane is like still like under like the law of like the country of origin or something. You know how this works, right? Like before customs, you're still like in that other. You know, talking about like how jurisdictions work. When we're
no, I understand, but like if you're gonna like, illegal immigrants, you can't just shoot them, right? Like
I agree. Well, I mean, our border patrol.
Some people will make the argument like we determine who has rights. We can just get rid of the rights for illegals. We just kill them. Now, I would disagree with them because that's immoral.
My point is that like different spaces have different legal statuses, and being in those spaces changes your legal status. So like you can go from a law-abiding citizen to a criminal. If I'm like, hey, like I want to go to the space like at the bank, at the back of the bank, right? like I just want to be there, and then all of a sudden I'm a criminal. Right?
No, because that conveys like intention, and like there's specific rules, and there's limits on how they can even punish you for that. But my question for you is like, what about? So is it just this idea of your definition of person is any human being not in a woman?
I see. So I grant you that my definition is arbitrary, right?
Okay.
I grant you that. But like all of them are. I think all of them are. So like I don't see a difference between them. Like people granting personhood at 3 months, 6 months, or whatever. That like at some point in time, like at least to the current construction of an, uh, uh pro-lifers, right? Uh, for most of them, not like I'm not talking about the politicians, but like for most people, like even then, there's so many of them are like, well, there's some sort of grace period here. We can still end this person's the baby's life, right? Or there's still circumstances in which that baby can be taken out because of like the life of the mother, right? Like we've we haven't given it personhood, and then they'll say later on, well, maybe it's too late, right? At a certain point, third trimester abortion, well, they're always banned or whatever, right? They're just coming up, right, with their own head canon as to when these things are acceptable. I'm like, all right, well then I decide to put the flag down when the baby is out of the womb.
So, and you would have to agree, though, that under this, I would agree, it's arbitrary. I would also say it's capricious. Um, Somebody could also just come up with a term that actually person means any human being who is not dependent on another human being. And then that could be their definition. And so then according to the, like if you're holding the child on the rope bridge example, like they could argue that, well, you're not actually dropping a person because that 6-month-old baby is dependent on the woman. So, I mean, you're just basically dropping a
Yeah, they
big
could come up
clump
with
of
that
cells.
definition, and then we would have a political difference. We would
Okay.
have to fight out in Congress. I don't know. Sure.
Right, right. Okay, I understand. So here would be my objection to this. Ultimately, in the sense of like all morality is subjective, sure. I guess you can come up with a line where like there's a moral bestowing of personhood that comes from leaving the woman as opposed to being inside the woman. Um, and this is just arbitrarily asserted, but this is the fact. I think personhood um, when I think of person, when I think of what makes a person and what makes a personality, and what do I think about when I think of person? How do you feel a person? It's not like I don't like have this like mental checklist of up check mark, they're out of the pussy, we're good. It's more along the lines of like, um, are they expressing mental processes, right? Like, is there activity? Is when they look at me, is there something behind those eyes, right? Is there something going on? Is there software to match the hardware? Are there thoughts? Are there dreams? Are there these kind of things going on that I would associate with a person? Because when you have a fully developed human being who lacks that, like let's say they're brain dead, I don't think they're a person anymore, right? I think that the person has left. There is no longer the fire has gone out. There's no longer a person. Um, so while I may be arbitrarily valuing this, I think it's a much better heuristic for determining what a person is when we're talking about like their mental status, like if anything is going on in their brain. Do you think a brain dead person is a person, Prime?
Um.
Completely brain dead.
Okay, is Ty a person?
Wow!
I'm kidding.
You
I'm
you were
kidding,
just looking around to throw a shot at somebody. He was right there, and you were just like,
Oh, I felt it. I felt it through the screen. Okay. I'll bite the bullet on this one and say no.
Okay. I thought you were talking about yourself. Wait a second. I thought you
I
were
mean,
going
if-
on with the joke.
Hey, just because I feel like I'm out of person doesn't mean I'm not. But you know that we'll leave that for another day.
Are they a person? This is a tough one. I'm sorry. This is really a tough one for me.
that's fair enough.
Yeah. Um, I guess mm, I reserve the right to change my mind on this later on. But I think I would take your stance in that like at some point when they've like lost everything, brain activity, they're like no longer really a person, and their moral consideration isn't quite the same. Hey, Rob North, sorry, 1 second. Rob North, thank you for the kind raid. Hope you had a fantastic night, Rob. And hope to have you on here soon. I hit Rob up all the time to get him on.
Yeah, he's good shit.
Yeah, I think Rob's a lot of fun, a lot of frustration, but a lot of fun. But shout out to you, Rob Noor. I hope you've had a fantastic night. Shout out to the audience, guys. Hit the follow button if you haven't done so yet. We'd love to have you here. We're having like a bit of a smaller panel than we usually do, but I think we're hitting on some interesting topics. So yeah, hit the follow button. We'd love to have you. Um, yeah. So anyway, the light goes dark. We let the fire die. I was trying to go for a Dark Souls reference there. I'm sorry. And then we yeah, I think
Oh, that was really it's a very niche example, but
yeah, I know. Yeah, but yeah, so I would agree with you there.
Okay, so if that's the case, if you can agree with me that the person is gone once the light goes out, doesn't it also stand to reason then that like the person probably happens when the light goes on, when there's some kind of brain activity, like some level of brain activity going on, as opposed to just like sliding through a hole? It seems like one is much more like intuitive, at least, than the other in terms of defining what a person is, right? Because you both are arbitrary, and you could, right? You could define person as like if they wear blue on Sundays. Like you could do that, I guess. But like, it's a political difference.
So I would say that I hear you on that, and like your logic is perfectly sensible. Um, but I think that it like that the brain dead individual is no longer like dependent on their life, specifically on this person. They'll maybe on machines, but not on another person. So that changes the calculation. So these things aren't even. And so them exiting the womb, there's something else that's happening at that point, right? Um, it's not simply them moving from one space to another. It's them like being all of a sudden an independent life form. And I think that's good enough for a boundary.
If you could, let's say you could remove a fetus at like 3 weeks, and you could grow them like in an artificial womb, like using machinery. Uh, do you
I
think you'd have an
anticipated
obligation
this.
to do that?
I anticipate this. I sorry, an obligation to do it? What do you mean?
Well, right, because like because what you said, what you seemed to say before is like even if you require some machinery to live, like you're still a person. And
Mm.
so this is the case where like a fetus, like we have the technology where they just require a machine to live, and they just so happen to be in the woman now. But if we could like move them from the woman to the machine, then they can live, right? And they can grow.
Yeah. I think I so I think if we had like some sort of like major technological improvement, um, and we had other options at the table that changes the moral like calculations. So I think that if we could uh I've been watching The Foundation, which is a show you all should be watching. It's amazing. It's fantastic. Um so get on that. And anyway, they have this technology where they can like directly take the like embryo or whatever out of the womb. Like they stick a machine on the woman's belly, right? And just whoop, it just sucks it out. Like no muss, no fuss. Then they can store it later on, and then they just put it into another woman's belly, just like whoop, like it's amazing. If we had that technology, that changes a lot of things, right? And uh, I think um it would matter in terms of like the future well-being of that child. Like are we sending it out to the world where it can just suffer more, like meaning that like a society that's not going to take care of it. Like if we have a society and infrastructure in place that is going to take care of this child, then yeah, we should definitely let this embryo grow and and live. But if we're not, then like what's the point of like putting this making this child grow to a fully formed human and then neglecting it and immiserating it. So I think that also matters. Um, so did I answer your question? Maybe not. I'm not sure if I did.
Well, you did. I mean, the only issue again is like when you're talking about, well, what if we don't have the infrastructure to support it? Surely you don't. That's not an actual like moral consideration that you're thinking of. you can want to support children. I get that. But you wouldn't, like, if you consider the child a person, you wouldn't just go kill the child because there's no foster homes available, right?
No. So, um, well, one, I think that is a moral consideration, not for killing a child that's already outside the womb, but like I think it is a moral consideration. It's the fact that's oftentimes the moral consideration that women use to decide they're going to keep a baby or not. Like, do they have the resources available? I want a society where the answer is absolutely, of course we do. And maybe the minute I
Sure.
have this baby, like the government comes online to assist and so that I can do a good job, right? In raising this child.
We're assuming that doesn't exist, though, right? In this scenario in which
Yeah.
there is no government services, I'm assuming you would still have a problem with me. Let's like, or I guess you still would be against the idea of somebody killing children, like let's say 3-year-old children, if they had no access to foster homes. Like you wouldn't, you'd have an issue with that
I,
because
w- yeah,
they're persons, right?
yeah, I would be against that. Like when I specifically said that, that was with this sci-fi technology in mind that I was talking about.
Right. But with the sci-fi technology in mind, if you could like transfer the fetus out into the machine, then it's not a machine now and not another person, and then so you would define the fetus as a person at that point, right?
I guess, yes. Again, I like I said, this changes the moral calculations so on like number of levels. But I would say, yeah, it changes the moral calculations. I think, um, uh, like I don't know. Like I think of that example of you're in a fertility clinic and like do you rescue like one baby or like a bunch of like frozen embryos, like are all those the same things? Well, we don't treat them as they're the same thing. um Even though that embryo is out of the womb, right? Is that a person now? I mean, I guess we can say so, but just like the way we treat these two aren't the same. Like it would
I hear
you're
you, but so that's an appeal though to just like, I don't know, like not popularity, but just like common sense. But a lot of people would also say like, in pro-life nations, especially, be like, well, we just don't allow abortion, right? Obviously, like we just don't see it like that is okay. Um, I don't know.
I
I'm still convinced as to the brain activity portion of kind of what I'm defining here. Just I think that's like for me just a lot more solid. One thing that you said I think is very correct, which I think is when you said that the reason why women do this is because they're trying to. You didn't say it in these words, but this is essentially what is true. I'll just say the truth. Is they're trying to dodge a responsibility. Right now, you could say justified or not justified, but that's what's happening, right? When you look at polling of women who've had abortions, the vast majority of them have had an abortion because they're concerned with how raising a child would impact their life in terms of their career, their especially their career specifically, their education, their personal relationships,
or there
all
is
that
like
stuff.
see family. Yeah.
Right. And so knowing this, like the machine hypothetical of like let's say we can pull a fetus out like at 3 weeks, or I don't know if it's an embryo still at 3 weeks, but you can pull an embryo out of 3 weeks, and like now it's a person, and then you can grow it in a machine. um, the people who have abortion would not be happy with that outcome because that's not the motivation for why they get abortions. The motivation why they get abortions is because they don't want the thing to exist, right? That's the goal. And the philosophical arguments to justify it seem to be tangential to the actual motivation, right? Like all the arguments in favor of abortion are not actually like directed towards the goal of abortion, which is I don't want this thing ruining my career.
Hold on. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. That like uh that they simply don't want it to exist. I mean, for some certainly, right? Like I don't have my rapist baby, right? I don't want this thing to exist. Fair enough. But for others, it's like, yeah, it's economic. They're like, I am not in that position to do so, and also going through the stress of childbirth, which is I hope we can all understand, a dangerous uh procedure, um then like I want to avoid that. I want to avoid the damage that it will do to me, and like the emotional trauma of like giving up their child, like a fully formed baby, and like handing it off, right? Like there are lots of reasons why they do these things. So to say necessarily it's just because they don't want it to exist, I think is incorrect
So
completely.
there's lots of reasons, but like the health angle, that's a minority of people who get abortions, right? Like I think it was 86% or 87% of women who get abortions. It's because like the primary reason is their career, right? That's what they're primarily worried about, or their education, which makes sense, right? Because that honestly, that's what's most at jeopardy if you have a child when you're not expecting it, right? It's going to be your career and going to be your education. Most women, at least in the first world, survive childbirth and go on to make a full recovery and are generally okay. Not all, but the vast, vast, vast majority do. Um, but also the vast majority, if they have an unplanned pregnancy and they have the kid, they're going to have to pay a cost when it comes to their career and their education. And so it makes sense that that's actually motivation. But if that's the real motivation, then then it seems like the machine example that we brought up before would not actually fix the problem. Because if that's not the real motivation, um,
Well, the machine
I
example gives the ability to. Maybe we should just move away from that because it's like a sci-fi thing. Maybe I
okay.
was incorrect to like insert this in this particular conversation. But like the whole point was that like it'll make it easier for them to give the baby up. That was where I was going with that. Um, but so I want to create. And Ty wants to jump in, so I'll give him the space. But like I just want to create a world where there are uh, where we do limit the number of abortions, right? Because if women are ending pregnancies because it conflicts with their opportunities, or um, economically, like they can't support like a third child because they have two already, and oftentimes women who get abortions are mothers themselves rather than new mothers. They already have a established family, and that's an issue for me. So it shouldn't be the case that having a baby conflicts with, or is incompatible with getting an education or their career, right? That seems like a place where the government could step in and assist. If you don't have a partner, well, even if you do have a partner, I think we should give assistance to all these individuals so that that's a non-issue. There are going to be a certain number of people who are still going to take that choice, but I'll vastly lower the number of abortions when we give people the economic options. So yeah. Ty, you want to say something?
Yeah, two things. I despise the conversation of we should abort for like an economic interest. If anything, like I will totally like this is where I'll split hairs with Lactoid. Like he's shaking yes, and I'm like, all right, cool. But like if the compromise is like we highly discourage abortions, but we have to actually like put in the child tax credit and we like give $2,000 for each parent a year or something like that, fine, I'm sold. Like I'll bite that bullet. Um, but that's kind of where I am on that issue. Um, I really actually just needed to bump in here because unfortunately I have to wage cage tomorrow and I'm already needing to be asleep about 40 minutes ago. So I love you all. Like this has been so much fun. I just I can't stay. I wish I could.
Okay. Thank you, buddy. Have a fantastic night, friend.
Yeah, you too. We'll catch you next time, guys.
Yep, see ya. Uh, what was the last thing I said about? Oh yeah, economic opportunities. You would agree with that much that we should give women. Well, I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't. Uh, maybe we'll look for another avenue to it. I mean, if not the government, but like you would
Yeah.
look for avenues to support mothers so that they can make a different choice.
I mean, ideally, that would look. Even if I don't want the government to do it, I think it's like a good thing to help people who are vulnerable, struggling, right? Like, um, I mean, look, ideally, this would be a, nuclear monogamous relationship where you had support, right? That's the ideal, and that should be what's encouraged. But even in situations where that's absent, um, local social structures, community groups, churches, to a huge extent. I'm not religious, but I think they do a lot of good work. Um, I think can be helpful in terms of helping people out of those kind of situations. I just sort of even though I recognize that it's a thing, I just categorically reject the idea that if it is murder, that your economic situation could ever justify murder, right? Like if you're having a hard time like affording, let's say you have 3 children right now and you're having a hard time affording 3 children. I think it would be just crazy for someone to say like, all right, we'll just dome your third kid, right? No, like we're not going to allow that to happen. You don't get to do that, right? You put them in the situation, right? There is I do have like a level of personal responsibility here that I want to like implement, which is, if you put the child in the situation, you do have an obligation to see them out of the danger that they're in, right? They are intrinsically in danger by being a child in this world. You put them in this situation. I think it makes sense for you to take them out of it. Just like, if you're walking when I asked hypothetical about like the tightrope, or I guess the ladder bridge, the Indiana Jones ladder bridge. If you grab the child and you walk like halfway across the bridge, you can't just drop the kid because you put the kid there, right? You are the one where now they are in danger of dying if you drop them. And so you have some duty to like see them to the other side. When you strap a car in the car seat, you have a duty to take them out and not leave them in the hot car, right? Like there are duties that exist when you put people in certain situations. And so that's why for me, like personhood is like the ultimate line. If that exists at any point during the pregnancy, that you put a person in any kind of precarious position, you should have to see them out of it. Um, and your economic situation is just not particularly important to me in terms of that calculation. Now, your economic position is important to me in the sense of I want you to have a good life and I want you to make a good life for the kid. But it's not important to me in the sense of like, these late term, you talked before about how like late term abortions are oftentimes only in catastrophic situations. And I can imagine catastrophic health situations where this is the case. And those are incredibly difficult. 100% agree with you. Um, but what's interesting is that when you look at the politicians arguing for like the late term abortion stuff, they often try to sneak in like economic situation into what they would define as like a justified reason to have a late term abortion or like some kind of catastrophic situation, like losing a job or just generally being poor. Um, but you understand what I'm saying, that like if it is a person, being poor is never an excuse to just get rid of a burden, right? Like you can't just do that if
I
it's
mean,
a person,
if it's a person, I guess, and we understand that I
right?
wouldn't be given it personhood in the womb.
Because it
Um,
hasn't slid through the
it
hole, the
had slid
magical
through the
hole.
hole.
It's got to go through the hole, and then it's person, right?
Yeah, yeah, because these spaces matter. And you're like you aren't dependent anymore on that individual. Yeah, actually it does matter.
If you're in that space, are you a double person? Like if that, let's say, like for
My
sex,
if I go back into the womb,
yeah, are you like a double person now because you're your own person, or do you lose your personhood? Right, you would lose your personhood because now you're in somebody else.
if I'm relying, yes, lactate. If I, as a fully grown adult human male, make it back inside a woman's womb, yeah, I guess I lose my person. She has too because she's fucking dead. But like,
Wait. What about the adult humans who are dependent on the labor of other people in society to survive?
I don't think
Are
those
they
are
are
the.
they people?
I don't think those are the same thing, and I don't think those are the same thing. But I so I think it's crazy. I think it's crazy to say that these things shouldn't matter when we're talking about a child still in the womb. These economic calculations, of course, they should. Of course, because if you don't have the resources to raise this child, that makes a big fucking difference. Um, uh, like uh, like your life trajectory changes rapidly when you have a baby. Even even for people who are resourced, their life trajectory changes completely because they had a baby. So of course that should matter. Of course, it should be a calculation, and I acknowledge that calculation, and I want to tilt it in the direction of life. And so, as because I had agreed with you previously that the government could be a tool to affect moral policy, to affect morality, right? That we should use policy there, and that would be the most effective tool to help women. There's one of those Scandinavian countries where you come from. They have I think it's like Iceland. Like when you have a child, like you get an immediate care package from the government, like with car seat and like diapers and formula and shit, right? Like you get an immediate care package because the government is letting you know, hey, we're on your, we have your side, or we got your back, right? On your side, got your back, and that we will be supporting you, throughout, like this time. You aren't alone. That's fucking huge. That's that like if my friends on the right like truly cared about like guaranteeing life, then this is exactly the policies to be pushing. Exactly that. When women know that they are not alone, that the community actually cares, that the government actually cares, yeah, you would save a lot of lives, or a lot of embryos would make it out. And even if you criminalize it, a lot of people, as women have shown throughout all of time, they're still going to try to find ways to end those lives. So instead of like going through the criminal system to do this, let's go through the economic system. Let's give them choices. Let's take away stigma, right? Like there was stigma before about being like, you know, a single mother, and so they sent you to like an Irish laundromat, you know, like instead of making it as difficult as possible for a woman who finds herself in that situation, make it as easy as possible. And we should do that collectively.
Would you be comfortable with like a carrot and a stick philosophy where all those things that you just proposed are like a thing and then you also criminalize like abortion?
No, because people are going to fall through the cracks.
Hmm.
I'm all about helping
Are
the
you
natural
okay?
order.
Would you be okay with I don't, this is probably bullshit, but I read some story somewhere where it was like, because you mentioned Iceland, and when you mention Iceland, I think of eugenics. If you had like a situation where, like, let's say a bunch of feminists were like, all right, we're all going to get pregnant and we're aborting every male child. We're only going to have women. Would you be fine with this? Like, technically, it's not people, right? So you would just be fine, no issue.
I mean, um, I am. Well, I guess those are under different circumstances, so I guess it doesn't matter. But I'm like, I'm comparing this to China and the massive abortion of girls. But that was under like social pressure, like governmental pressure, that made it, and economic pressure that made it difficult. Um, because you know people don't have like they don't have a social security, they don't have any guarantees for um their old age, and so they look at boys as their economic vehicles. So if they're going to have just one kid, they're going to have a boy to take care of them when they're older, and that's the retirement package. But if you give them a retirement package, then that changes the calculus for them, and so girls get to live. See how that works? Um, but in this case, I mean, I like sure. I mean, I guess if yeah, they wanted a girl, go ahead, knock it
Okay.
out.
Would you be all right with an abortion doctor who only gives black women abortions?
Only give black women abort. If black women go to them for abortions, then yeah, he can
A traveling doctor, like goes to black women specifically and gives them free abortions.
give them free abortions. Yes, that's fine, right? Even if he wants to reduce the black population,
Yeah.
right? Then
What if
that's
I could prove to you that this policy like it became prevalent enough where like it would substantially reduce the black population? Would you care?
Yes, I would care because that shows a policy failure that we haven't supported black mothers. If they are all making these choices, that means that as we have done throughout the centuries here in this nation, we haven't been supporting black mothers and economically and socially. And so we should change that so that their calculations change.
What if they got paid? So, like, what if you had, like, let's say, a racist group from an organization that went to black mothers, black pregnant women, and paid them 20 grand to get an abortion, like specifically, and to get sterilized on top of that? Would you be okay with this organization?
Oh, I feel like the best hypothetical.
I just want to know your answer.
Okay. I guess I would have a law to say that because because my priorities are like tilted towards life, then I would outlaw that group being able to do that.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
What if instead of giving abortions, they just gave sterilizations and they paid them for it? There's an organization kind of, it's not racially based, but it's called Project Prevention, in which they'll pay women to get sterilized. Are you in favor of allowing this program to, like, maybe absorb this within Planned Parenthood and make it proliferate? If you, let's say, you only offered poor people sterilization so they don't have a kid and become poorer.
uh so I guess I want to there's a line I want to balance here because I want to, and I think you agree with me on this. I want people to be able to sell their organs, right? Um, I think that should be a thing. Like if they have that choice, and or if they need to, then they should definitely do so. Um, Assuming like these people are able to like participate in a market, fairly and like get like a
Yeah.
fair price for their for organs. Um, but in terms of sterilization, this isn't uh like providing hmm, uh pay people to sterilize them. Um, I guess my problem is that like there could be a lot of I'd have to think about this one because I think this could be pernicious outcomes, and the ones I
Yes,
want to avoid.
but at the same time, right? Like, bodily autonomy, right? Who are you to tell somebody they can't get $10,000 to get sterilized
Yeah, exactly. The same reason why I think we should allow
for organ
selling
trading?
organs. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess that would be fine. I'd have to
Oh,
put some.
damn. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm taking the yes. I'm going to tell everybody
Yeah.
that's yes. There.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. But like the problem would be, yeah, if it was like racially motivated, or like for um blind people, right? Like this went around for like blind women, and we're like we'll pay money to sterilize you. I think like there are some like disastrous moral questions there, and I'd have a problem with that. But I don't. Yeah, I don't know how you legislate this, right? Like this
That's
seems like a weird moral problem, so I don't know how you legislate that.
no. That's tough. I think we probably find almost complete agreement then in terms of the organ trading, in terms of like project prevention. But we probably have some pretty. I still think that with specifically the abortion question, I still think there's obviously, because for me, person is, mental processes, hopes, dreams, thoughts. And for you, it's whether they've slid through a hole. There's like going to be fundamental differences. I mean, that's how you defined it, right?
Yeah, but like I don't know, like there's mental processes, like well, I mean, I guess you would like I don't know, like what are the value of the of that near infants mental processes, like the hopes and dreams. They don't have hopes and dreams. I mean,
They have thoughts. They have dreams.
they
Right?
don't what of what of like
I
feelings and
don't.
just like
I don't know. They can't
yeah,
remember them.
exactly nothing, right? They have nothing. fuck
Okay,
you
just because they
anyway.
can't remember them doesn't mean they're not dreaming, right? So I can't just go shoot someone with amnesia, right? Obviously, just because you can't remember, just because
Yeah,
somebody
I
has a
know, I
speech
agree,
impediment.
but like that's not the foundation, or that's not the criteria I would use in the first place. So it doesn't matter to me, right? Like
Right, what's the criteria?
the criteria that go out that hole. Is that the no longer depend? Oh, not human. That would be the um uh yeah. So well, they're no longer dependent. God damn it. Right?
Oh my God! I look, it's something.
Oh, boy.
That was good. I think we have some fundamental differences that I don't know if they can be well logically resolved.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
that
do
was
you
funny.
have I know we're over time. But do you have anything you want to bring up? That like, like you got a bone of me, like I've said some nonsense, and you really want to take me to task?
I mean, look, your leftist stuff is obviously nonsense, but I'll say this. Um, I think you are able to do something that a lot of people, a lot of lefties especially, can't do. Is that like even when you disagree with it, like when somebody's explaining a position to you, like you actually recognize like the position, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, and then like you'll argue against it, um, and you'll be very good faith about it. So I mean, this was a very good experience. I thought Tiberius was great. I think you were great, and even though I know we went through a lot, I appreciate most the honesty and good faith that that you engage my ideas with. So, and I mean that sincerely. It was a lot of fun. But I mean that's it's the policy positions that I'm going to hate, obviously, and I'm always gonna pick those bones with you. But I don't unless some very deep values change. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know when we're going to agree or not. I mean, sometimes we have random points of agreement, right? Because there's overlaps, right? And I think that demonstrates that neither of us are partisan hacks, right? I think it
Mhm.
demonstrates that we just have different value systems that when they line up, and I'll be right there with you. But
Yeah.
when it comes to
And
taxes, absolutely not.
like, well, okay, so like the more I think about it, right? Like I guess like I'm fine with the construction that like taxes are theft. Like I'm actually like fine with that construction. Like it doesn't matter to me.
Awesome.
Like I don't think
Now I
it.
just got to get everybody to accept it, and then I'll be golden.
Yeah, like I because like if one this is like a constant barrier when talking to people of your ilk, right? Like that like once you get to the taxation or stuff or whatever, right? Like I conceive of it as a responsibility, a price for like a well functioning society, right? But then you would say, well, that sounds like the racketeering, right? Protection director. And okay, all right, like he's like you want to look at this in the worst possible light. I look at it in the like a normal human possible light. So like again, but it doesn't matter, right? Like we can understand that it's an extraction of wealth from these individuals, and whether consensual or not, right? Like paying taxes can suck individually. Like I paid my taxes. I am happy to keep the nation functioning, but like still there was a lowering of my bank account, which kind of sucked for me, you know. So there you go. Like I mean, I guess I agree. So there's no point in fighting on that. Like I don't think that is as big of a like gotcha as like libertarians and ANCAPs think it is, you know?
So for me, for my brand of libertarianism, for me, taxes or theft is the start of a conversation. I would agree with you that for a lot of people, and especially anarcho-capitalists, taxation is theft is the end of a conversation, right? And I think that's kind of the difference of opinion that like-minded people can come to, where I think for a lot of people, they don't ever acknowledge what taxes are, right? It's just kind of like an ethereal sort of like concept to them. Like the government blew $850 billion some other day, right? And most people, they look at that and they just see numbers and they don't really comprehend how much money that really is, and they don't really comprehend where it came from, and they don't really, and I think just for me, just drawing that line, just showing like, hey, that's your money, right? As long if I can just get people to acknowledge that and just we can start the conversation there, and then we can have a conversation afterwards about the efficacy of what it should be spent on, how much we should spend on things, different value systems as to what's important, what's not important. That is what I'm looking for. I'm not trying to use it to end a conversation. I'm trying to use it to start a conversation.
So I've never really done this with you or Scott. Um, because I don't think I have like the knowledge base to argue this effectively against people who I acknowledge you and Scott are like you have a solid like economic foundation and like lexicon, and argue against you on these grounds is very difficult. I'm not sure I'm the person to do it, but but see, I'm on the MMT train, right?
Oh no! Oh my fucking god! Prime! Oh, you could have said anything else.
And so
Not
like,
even Synth won't accept the MMT label. Oh my fucking god!
so I'm on the MMT train, and I think the value of your money comes from the scarcity of it all, and so the taxation helps increase that scarcity. And like with our government, since it can, since the world's reserve dollar and or currency, um, and we could just print more, and it's based on the value. Like the strength of the economy, right? And that we will still be there tomorrow. Yeah, we can like it's not actually a one-to-one thing. Like your money is simply being destroyed when you send it to IRS. Like not in the way that you think of it, but like literally just like it's just gone. It's just being wiped out, and then we, keep a certain balance of money within the economy. Like, yeah, so I don't know. But like I,
Well, we're gonna have to debate that at some point.
that's the thing. That's the thing.
Maybe not right now, but we're gonna have to discuss that. And if you're gonna bring on an MMT economist, I know one. I know an economist that's not that's anti-MMT, and I'm gonna bring him on.
If I could find economists that would argue for this, that would be fantastic. I would actually love to
that'd
hear
be
that.
interesting, yeah. And I do have an economist who would have that debate.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I don't have I feel like I don't have the vocabulary, the arguments that I can deploy, like the same way I can do like within an abortion debate. I don't have that for MT. That's why I haven't done it with you before. So
I've never known of that. This is the worst.
I've mentioned this before. I've actually mentioned some stream too.
I really? I
before. Yeah.
I must have. Maybe I thought it was a meme, or maybe I didn't catch it. Right? Shit.
you blacked out.
I blacked out. It was trauma response. I didn't record it in my memory.
But like, yeah. So I don't think these things are one to my understanding. Yeah. We can talk about it. I don't know if I can. I feel comfortable debating you on it. I had to put just a lot more effort into understanding the situation. But I would definitely talk about it. Yeah.
All right. Well, sounds good.
Okay. Friend, thank you so much. Lactoid, I think, is fantastic. I tell him this all the time. He's one of the best people to argue with, right? On any particular subject. Uh, he'll say wild things. Apparently, I'll say wild things. um, but always good faith in our discussion. So like shout out to my man. And and I gotta say this, like we didn't have a lot of people for this week. It's just like sometimes it happens. Different weeks, different things are happening. Sometimes there are weeks where everyone is doing things, of like the usual crew. Um, but I had Lactoid, and I'm like, I knew I can make this a great discussion. Like I was sure of it, you know. And it turned out to be the case. So shout out to my man Lactoid for always being around, being helpful, and being one of the most interesting individuals I ever have the privilege to talk to. Thanks, friend.
Absolutely. And a big, shout out to you. So, Lactoid TV, that's my Twitch account. And today is my 1 year affiliate anniversary. And it was you who encouraged me to take the plunge and to get this whole thing started. And, I think, you've got a great community, Prime. I'm really, really happy with the community that I have. Really great people, and yeah, thank you so much for convincing me to make the right decision, which lefties usually don't do, but this time you did, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Abortion loving, God hating lefties. Yeah. Thank you so much. Majin, thank you for the Prime Gaming resub. It's a big help to the community. All right, so yeah, and congrats to our friend Lactoid. Let me hit you up in terms of our shout out here so people can find you. Lactoid, is it ACU or just Lactoid?
It's just Lactoid TV.
Oh, Lactoid TV.
Well, believe it or not, Lactoid was taken. Fucking crazy, I know, right? I think it was taken by an account that I don't have access to anymore. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. You were saying that you probably locked yourself out of it. All right. Anyway, thanks all for this. I think I'm going to just I think I'm just gonna end the stream here. But you know what we could do, right? We could go over to our friend Lactoid who's streaming, right? You're streaming right now?
Please tell me I'm streaming, but I'm gonna be rating out too, because I also have a salary cage tomorrow.
So what Lactoid will do, he'll wait a few minutes so that I can send my stream over to him. And then you guys can realize how great he is and follow his channel. So we'll grow, hopefully get him partner one of these days. Let's see, rate channel. Lactoid TV. Yeah, we gotta support our friends, and Lactoid has always supported us. So we'll support him back. Send him out. This countdown has started. It's super weird for me when the countdown is happening because I don't know what to say. So I feel like this. So, but go over